Dieb and youst, Wind of Ice. Regina Ruby. Summary. The North has chosen its protector in Brandon of House Stark, the Wild Wolf. The South has given a bride to the North. The Princess of Ilyar of House Targaryen is sent north to marry the heir to Winterfell, Brandon Stark, as a way for her father to both control and defend House Stark, as she is considered unfit to marry any of her 3 brothers because she is frail of health and too sweet of disposition. She comes north with her small retinue and her bastard half-brother Selhino Blackfyr to marry in House Stark and hopefully find herself a home in the cold north. She would seem as a fish out of water there, but the North has chosen its bride, a princess kissed by ice and shining like a pale moonlight. How may the rebellion's tides change with a more powerful North, with giants, dwarfs and stronger clans of shamans, and how will Brandon's fate change with a Targaryen bride by his side? Notes. For Feral G4. Hello. So this work is a gift for Feral G4, who asked me under another of my works in this fandom if I'd like to work on a multi-chapter fic with a more powerful North, and we sort of went from there. So I thank you all if you have decided to try and read this. I am not an English speaker since I live in Italy, but I write all my fic in English, yet bear in mind that I am not native speaker when you read, but if you find any errors, or hell, if you want to better this fic, please come forward, for I'd highly like any input that may better my writing skills. So, I thank you all and hope you all like this first double chapter in which we met our 2 main characters, Vial, our OC, and Brandon. See the end of the work for more notes. Chapter 1, Vial I and Brandon I. Chapter text. Vial I. She curled her long, slender, porcelain fingers around the drapes of deep blood red of the curtains of the carriage they were riding in, jumping when it hit the umpteenth rock during their journey north of the neck. She moved them a bit, letting the cold, harsh northern winds sweep inside the small wooden carriage by the small window, carding between her silver blondish tresses and caressing her ivory cheeks. The north pale landscape met her gaze. It was a mulish green and a watered brown and blue, an immense, flat expanse of steppe covered by a thin veil of frost. Lumpy, slender snow-white birch trees studded with coal-black stains towered proudly on the wildlife. Small patches of light blue daffodils quilted the pale, short grass. The sky was leaden and covered with a thick blanket of clouds that seemed as light as vapor. "Your Highness," please, called her lady-in-waiting. Lady Shara closed the curtains. "We don't want you to fall ill so far from home," she told her, her tone filled with concern. Vial rolled her eyes but let the curtain fall shut, hiding the pale, beautiful and raw landscape from her sight. She turned her light, bright amethyst's eyes on her friend and sighed. "I think it would serve me well to actually take a breather, Shara," she suggested. "I am starting to feel cooped up here," she added. "I am sure some fresh air will do me good." She tried, hoping that her tone would get through the woman's fear she was going to fall ill if she wasn't bulked in the warmest, most heavy furs ever. "Not in the slightest, Your Highness," the woman replied, her tone cold and recriminating, as if she was talking to a small, spoiled brat of 5 instead of her princess, naught but 2 years younger than her. "You should be mindful of your frail health and behave accordingly." Vial pressed her full lips in a thin line and nodded, looking down to her hands, folded demurely in her lap. "You should know better by now, Your Highness, than take risks with your health," she added for good measure, her tone one of superiority. Not for the first time since they had set foot out of King's Landing, Vial mused if that was how the Northerners were told she was. Frail of health and of tender disposition, it would explain why every keep they stopped by in their trek north she had been almost coddled, even if with cold, judging eyes. She wasn't so easily ill, thought. True, she had been born early of almost 2 moon, little and blue-faced. Her mother had had a very difficult time carrying her, as opposed as when she had carried her brothers, and when she had been born the Maesters had little hope she would survive the night, since she had looked to be struggling to breath on her own. Surprisingly, she had survived that first night and the one after and all the other for the next 6 and 10 years. She had gotten stronger, but despite it she had grown smaller in frame than her mother too, who was almost as tall and slender as her father and often ill. She had been the delight of her tutors since she had started talking quite early and walking earlier still. By the time she was 4 she already knew her letters well enough that she could write her own name and could read almost anything. By 8 she was fluent both in conversational and written Western and High Valyrian. Yet she had been smaller of any other child her age, and when she had fallen desperately ill when she was 9 she had been swept to Dragonstone, where the sulfur thermal posts were told to help people breathe better. She had remained on Dragonstone for the next 4 years and had set foot back in the capital only after her father had been rescued, but he had not been the father distant but good she had knew in her infancy. He was prone to fits of rage and cruelty that scared her, and he almost never considered her. When she was born her mother had been happy because they had meant to marry her to one of her brothers, mayhaps as a second wife for Roger, since his Dornish wife was struggling with giving him an heir, but by the time talk of it should have been made, when she had returned to King's Landing a woman of 4 and 10, that dream had been squashed under the boots of his father, who would not give a woman so frail of health in marriage to any of his sons and heirs. Vielle had tried not to let it bother her brothers loved her and that would be enough, and her father would one day see reason. But he never did, and her brothers had grown distant. They still loved and cared for her, but they also looked down at her because of her sweet disposition and lacking of furious temper that made their family great. At the next rock Vielle was prepared and did not jump, but Lady Shara did and smacked her elbow against the wooden wall of the carriage. "By the gods, do this Northman not care for their roads?" she muttered. "Primitive, barbarian jackals. How they got to obtain you in marriage is a mystery." Vielle looked back at the woman, at her dark brows and hair and at her black eyes, and shrugged. "I suppose my father has his reasons." She conceded. "Dragons do not belong north of the neck," she muttered, shivering. "Neither do we Hightowers. We should have remained south. This cold climate will not be good for your health." She pondered. Vielle sighed. "Shara," she tried, "I've not been ill in many years. I think we can be quite safe in thinking I won't fall over the next time a gust of wind kisses my cheeks." "Nonsense," she said, doing a dismissive gesture. "I have heard your breath at night, your highness, it's constricted. I can only hope Winterfell is a keep in more than name and they have warmer chambers than the last we've been hosted in. Damned cold north." "I found the north to be quite lovely, Shara," she protested, "and the people to be kind if a bit cold." "I don't think you should speak ill of them. They are my people now, as I will be their lady." The woman made another dismissive gesture. "Don't be foolish, you are first and foremost a Targaryen princess," she said. "They should kiss the ground you walk on. Instead they have been cold and distant, distrustful. I tell you, a mass of ungrateful barbarians." She straightened her shoulders a bit. "Be what it may, Shara," she said, trying to steel her voice as much as she could. "The north is my land now," she added. "The Northmen my people, and I would thank you kindly if you refrained to offend them so." Shara looked at her as if she had sprouted another head, and Vielle sighed, turning to watch the curtain dance with each hole and rock the carriage's wheels hit. "I think we should read some poem, your highness, don't you think?" she asked, trying to change topics. "I would like that, thank you," she said kindly, as the woman produced an old tome and offered it to her as she started sewing again in silence as Vielle started to recite the old Valyrian poem. After a bit thought she rested the tome on her tights and asked, "Don't we have any book on northern lore or history? I would like to read those." Shara made a grimace. "We don't," she said. "Those illiterate people do not write books." Lord Brandon knew his letter well enough, she protested, thinking back of the only missive she had received from her soon-to-be husband when the betrothal had been finalized. "I doubt they don't know how to write books. Surely we must have overlooked them when we departed from King's Landing." Shara did not comment, but it was clear she did not believe what Vielle had just said, so she returned to her poem, yet thinking about what a land as apparently barren and raw and wild could actually hide in plain sight. "Why have we stopped?" Lady Shara asked when the carriage came to a sudden halt. "Is it already time to make camp?" Vielle didn't know, so she swooped the curtain away from the window and peeked outside. Her older brother was barking out orders to set camp, but there was still light out. "What happens, Selhino?" she asked, calling out to her brother. He turned around and galloped on his horse to the carriage side. "We are making camp already," he said. "I feel like we are followed," he added. "I'd like for us to be all set before the sun sets." "Followed?" Lady Shara cried out, outraged. "Who'd dare?" "Probably only some wildlife," her brother replied sternly. "Mayhap a boar or a bear." "It is nothing to be worried about. We shall keep you safe," he added, looking directly at her with his onyx eyes tinted with purple. Vielle smiled and set her hand to rest atop his on the window. "I know, I trust you, Selhino," she promised, watching as his handsome dark-skinned face split into a reserved smile. "If you think we should make camp, so we should." She then smiled. "How far are we from Winterfell yet?" "I think we should arrive there as programmed in less than a week from now," he told her, gripping her hand back to convey his thanks for her trust. "Why don't you get out of this carriage? You should both stretch your legs a bit. It's going to be cramped staying inside all day long." Vielle smiled. "Princess Avalia should not get cold," Lady Shara snapped back at her brother. "You should have her best interest at heart, Black fear. Her brother's eyes became stony as his face and Vial turned to her lady in waiting, her brows arched. I think you should apologize to my brother, Lady Shara. You have spoken out of turn. He has my best interest at heart, and as I already have said, she added, a bit of fresh air is going to work wonders for me. You are welcome to stay inside if the northern climate is too harsh for you. She then turned and opened the wooden door of the carriage as her brother offered her a hand to help her descend from it. She didn't look back, for if she did she would feel sorry for having spoken in such a way to the lady. She took hold of her brother's hand and let him help her to her feet. Indeed, her legs had started cramping, what with being cooped up all day long inside the carriage, and she followed him when he led her to walk. They passed by the side of the wooden carriage. She was riding in a wooden carriage with coal-black inlays and a wooden carved dragon head. As they passed by it, Vial caressed its profile and then continued to walk up to the hill as she watched around herself in wonder. It's so big, she commented as the sun started setting, bathing the normally cold, blue hue of the landscape in soft and warm golden and reddish glow with a twinge of pink. It looks enchanted. I am happy to hear it, Selhino said, resting his hand atop her in the service of his elbow. It'd be tragic indeed if you were bound to hate the place in which we are supposed to spend the rest of our lives. I could free you of your oath if you ever wished to return south, she offered softly, still looking at the landscape as if unable to actually tear her gaze away. Don't say such a silly things, he told her, nudging her nose with a gloved fingertip. I promised to stay by your side forever, don't you remember? She remembered. She had been 4 and 10, freshly returned at court after the ninepenny treachery and her stay on Dragonstone, and she had felt like a sore thumb, always under the watchful gaze of the judging courtesans. He had been 7 and 10, the bastard son of Aerys II Targaryen, and he had already been knighted by their father before his imprisonment. He too had been a sort of outsider, and often they would found themselves drawn to one another and had kindled a friendship and kinship stronger than with their other brothers. When she had been promised to Brandon Stark, Selhino had sworn his sword to her aid, and had swore the oath of the sworn shield, and had promised to stay by her side forever. I do, she said softly, but if you ever wish to return south. There is nothing for me south of the neck, sister, he promised her. My mother is dead, my father is as good as dead, he added. You are the only one who matters anymore, our brothers can take care of themselves. My place is by your side. Vial nodded. Beside, he added, if I don't watch over you, who will? My husband, she replied almost without thinking, and sent him spiraling in a loud snorting laugh. Your husband, he asked? You don't even know the man and are already putting your faith in him. Should I not? She asked, feeling her cheeks pinking at being made fun of by her brother for her childish notion of what marriage would look like. She knew her parents did not love each other, not in the way a husband and a wife should, but they had had many children, many male children, and her. She wanted to believe that a true marriage could be happy in truth. Was it childish of her? From all the recounts, your betrothed's appetites are ravenous. By all accounts it is some kind of miracle he is yet to sire a bastard, he told her truthfully. Vial looked down to her gloved hands, curled tightly to each other before her womb. Her brother's hand on her shoulder made her snap her eyes up to meet his darker ones. I promised to always tell you the truth, he reminded her, and I say this only with your best interests at heart, sister. The man you are going to marry will most probably not be satisfied by only you. She gulped and steered her gaze away from her brother's eyes, looking back at the landscape of the north, flat and merciless. I will worry about it when the time comes, she decreed, but thank you for having told me. I should know who I am walking to. She fidgeted with the hem of her coal corset as her long, deft fingers trembled. It was finally time. Today they would ride inside Winterfell, the keep she was supposed to watch over when the time came. They had sighted the imposing castle from miles away. It stood at the center of the north, large and imposing with its towers and dark, dumb stone walls. The banner of House Stark, a grey direwolf on a white field, stood proudly hanging from the outer walls of the keep. A village was sat against its side. It teemed with life, and the noises of the small folk and their daily works could be heard from where they were. They had stopped for them to refresh themselves before they finally passed through the gates of the keep, and she would meet those who would become her new family. She was excited to meet them all, most of all her betrothed, the first son of Lord Rickard Stark, the Warden of the North. Yet now she felt so nervous she could scarcely stomach the very idea of going inside. Since 2 days prior, when they had started to skirt the outer border of the Wolfswood and she had started to feel watched, she hadn't been able to sleep properly. More so when once she had decided to walk a little to clear her mind, not alone, for they would never let her move a step if she had done so, and had sighed in the deep forest dark shadows, two enormous eyes of steel and sharp claws bared and shining under the moonlight. But as soon as the breath had been knocked out of her, the eyes had disappeared as had the claws, never to be seen again, yet the feeling of being watched had not passed. And now she felt not only watched but ready to puke for the nerves. She knocked on the wooden door of the carriage, demanding its immediate halt. "What happens, Your Highness?" asked Lady Shara, immediately concerned. Vielle pressed her hands to her abdomen that hurt at the imminent entrance in Winterfell, so nervous that she was on doing a bad impression. "Whatever happens from now on," had been her mother's parting words for her, "do me proud, child." Her father's had been crueler, more acre, as he had reminded her that from that moment on she was no more a Targaryen and she should look after herself. The concerned dark face of her brother was the first to come in sight as soon as the carriage stopped, and Vielle literally jumped out, disregarding her fur cloak and staring, pacing around, her hands pressed to her tummy. What if they didn't like her? They had to. She could not stomach the hate for the rest of her life. What if they never grew to like her, or worse, started to resent her because she was not the perfect dragon princess of stories? She would sooner launch herself from the highest tower. Vielle, her brother called, trying to stop her. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked her when finally she turned to look at him. "I am afraid," she muttered, feeling like a child. "What if they don't like me?" she mused, feeling more childish too because she had said it out loud. Her brother's expression turned soft. "If they don't, they are mighty stupid," he said, "and whoever disrespects you will meet the not blunt end of my sword, sister." "You are not alone," he promised her, grabbing her shoulder with his gloved hand. "I promise you. I will be there for every step of the way." Vielle nodded, biting her lips to keep the tears at bay. "Now dry your tears, sister. You are of the blood of old Valyria. The blood of Aegon the dragon, and no wolf should scare you," so he told her, softly kissing her forehead. Vielle closed her eyes and steeled herself before breathing out. "Thank you," she murmured to her brother. "Don't mention it," he smiled and escorted her back to her carriage. She put the first step on the wooden ladder that would lead her back inside the carriage and stopped before turning around, her silver blonde tresses swirling around her. "Bring me Silver Wave, please," she said. "I'd like to ride inside the keep." Despite phrasing it like a request, it was clear by her tone that it was a demand, and Lady Shara jumped out of the carriage, outraged as her brother started to obey her order. "What? Absolutely not, Your Highness. Out of question. You will tangle all of your hair and will look a fright before you're betrothed. Not to mention the cold winds, you could get a fever and—" "The princess," her brother seethed, "has deemed appropriate to ride inside the gates of Winterfell," he told her, "lady in waiting, and her order much surpass yours. So ride she shall. You may return inside the carriage if you will, or join her in her ride." It was a clear signal. He turned to her and smiled as he murmured while departing to obey her demand and bring her mare Emane or Harpagagon. "I have got your breathe." Vielle smiled softly and watched him as he went to find her mare. She turned to Lady Shara, who looked as if she had been struck. "You absolutely cannot, Your Highness." She tried again to regain her footing by coming closer to her and making sure her cloak was wrapped well enough around her shoulders. "What will I do if you fall ill?" "Come now, Lady Shara," she said kindly. "I won't fall ill just because I have ridden inside the gates. They are not even so far away. See," she said, pointing to the keep in the distance. "Besides, I will be the lady wife of the Warden of the North." "My lady," she reminded her, "I should get accustomed to this climate, or would you have me cooped up wrapped in a wool for the rest of my life?" It was clear by her expression that that was exactly what she believed the best course of action. "I will ride, my lady," she added, sounding more determined than she had ever when talking to her lady in waiting. "You are welcome to join me or ride in the carriage, your choice," she said, trying her best to sound convincing, but her heart also went out to the woman because she looked mighty cold and was shivering all over. Vielle imagined she didn't, because her blood, being of blood of old Valyria, was hotter than normal. The woman looked back at the carriage and Vielle nudged her to it. "Go on, I won't be offended," she assured her as her brother came back, offering her his hand. Vielle smiled to the lady and turned, letting him lead her to her mount, and helping her mount, she adjusted herself on the saddle and gripped the rein tight, caressing her mare's silver wavy mane. She whispered to the animal in High Valyrian, and the mare nodded her head as if she had understood her. She then straightened herself on the saddle and gave her brother a solemn nod, and they started their slow ride to the keep. By the time they finally got close enough to the gates to actually see the grounds, her nerves had somewhat calmed down a bit, and Vielle rode inside, followed closely by her brother and the rest of her humble household. The entirety of the Winterfell court was there to greet her, as they should be as per etiquette. In the front row stood the Stark family themselves. She had learned what she could of them during her travel north. Lord Rickard was the Warden of the North, and he had sired by his wife, Lady Lyra Stark, 4 children, 3 of whom were male. The firstborn, Lord Brandon, was her betrothed. He was closely followed by another brother, Lord Eddard Stark, whom she knew was in the Vale under the tutelage of Lord Jon Arryn, and a sister, Lady Lyanna. Last had come another brother, Lord Benjen. In that moment, waiting for her, were Lord Rickard, a man in his 40s with greying hair held back from his stern face. He looked severe. Lady Lyra was a beautiful woman in her late 30s with ebony hair peppered with silver tresses. She had a kind smile on her long face and grey eyes. Lord Benjen was small, a young boy of maybe 10 and 1 at most, with a mop of dark hair and the long face that seemed to characterize all the Starks. He looked as uncomfortable as she felt, and she thought to have found in his kind eyes a kindred soul. Lady Lyanna was a beauty of 2 or 3 and 10 with dark ink black hair, a long stern face, eyes of steel, and her face set on a stony expression that left little to imagination. She was not happy she was here. Then her eyes swept to Lord Brandon, and the breath got stuck in her throat. He was a good head taller than his father and twice as muscular. He would tower over her tiny frame as he seemed to tower over anyone around. He had the long stern face of his family, but his grey-brown eyes were gentle, as was the curve of his full lips half hidden by his beard. He looked combed and comfortable in his light armor. They were sided by a maester of the citadel, a young man that could be their master-at-arms and the rest of their court. Presenting Her Highness called her steward the Princess of Ilyar of House Targaryen, daughter of our Grace, the King heiress of House Targaryen, second of his name. Vielle brought Silver Wave to a stop, and she literally breathed out a lock of silver hair that had stuck in her mouth after the ride inside. The court fell in a deep bow to salute her, and she looked back at her brother, who shrugged and dismounted before helping her off her mare. "How do I look?" she murmured, suddenly afraid of the impression she might have made while riding inside. She would look like a savage. He watched her with his dark purple eyes and smiled free. He said, "I think they'd like that." She smiled and nodded, disentangling herself from him and walking at a sedate pace to the Stark family. Lady Lyanna had her face scrunched in a nasty expression, but Vielle tried not to let it bother her and stopped before Lord Rickard and did a small courtesy. "Lord Stark," she greeted, "it is an honor to be welcomed in your home." The man stood straighter and observed her before nodding. "It is our honor to bind ourselves to a princess such as yourself," he offered, although it felt stiff and untrue. False courtesies. Vielle knew them well. She caught a movement at the side of her eye, and suddenly a plate with bread and salt was offered to her. She remembered having read somewhere it was custom in the north and also somewhere past the neck to offer the guests bread and salt to welcome them in one's home. She had never accepted bread and salt, but took it, and with a trembling hand she brought it to her mouth, eating it. She stomached the salty bread with some difficulty, and it left her mouth in need of water, but she breathed out and tried to give them the best smile she could. "May I present my brother, Sir Selhino Blackfyra, my sworn shield," she said, gesturing to said brother as he came closer and bowed. She noticed that Lord Brandon towered a good head over him too, and that since she had entered the gates the gaze of her betrothed had yet to waver from her. "We heard much of your ability on a horse and in joust," Sir Lord Roderick commented. "We are happy to house you." Her brother smiled and bowed his head as per custom, and Vielle smiled softly as Lord Rickard gestured for his wife. "May I present my wife, the Lady Lyra of House Stark?" The woman curtsied and she did the same. "Your Highness." "My lady," she offered, "I am most happy to meet you." The woman gave her a warm smile and her eyes twinkled likewise. "Your Highness, we have been waiting for you." She gave her a smile in return and turned back to Lord Rickard, waiting for the next presentation. "My only daughter," she turned to the Lady Lyanna. "That did a truly awful curtsy." "The Lady Lyanna of House Stark." She smiled softly at the young girl. "My lady," she greeted, although the girl had yet to address her properly. "I have heard you are a mighty great horse rider," she said, remembering the words of Lord Glover when asked about the youngest lady of House Stark. "Mayhap I could join you in one of your rides, although I am afraid of not being as good as you," she offered. The girl made a strange face but nodded. "I would be honored, Your Highness." She noticed the girl looking at her father as if to be sure he approved, and she realized she must have been instructed on how to address her very thoroughly. She didn't blame her for resenting her for the long hours she would have spent learning the proper etiquette, although any lady of noble standing should know at least the simplest rules. My youngest Lord Ricard, continued Lord Benjamin of House Stark, he told her, gesturing to the boy, who was quite bold indeed, because he took a step and had the audacity of taking her hand before it was offered to kiss the back of it. Why, you are quite dashing, aren't you, my lord? She jested, smiling as the boy's cheeks reddened, but he stood true and took his step back. You are as pretty as I had seen, he told her. Vielle frowned, then realized he must have seen the painting of her family was bound to have sent north when first talk of the betrothal must have been broached. Why, thank you, my lord, she offered back, and he smiled, looking as if his idol had just smiled down at him, and Vielle was truly touched by his childlike wonder. Lord Ricard cleared his throat. Well, he offered, last but not least, let me present you my heir and your betrothed, your highness, my son, Lord Brandon of House Stark, he said, gesturing to said son. Lord Brandon took a step closer, but did wait until she offered her hand to actually kiss it, his eyes never once leaving hers. He did tower over her. She arrived barely to his chest. He was so tall, yet she did not feel crowed. It didn't feel like he was over her, more like he was around her, wrapping her in his presence. His eyes were not just grey, she realized, seeing them up close. They were peppered with dark, molten brown, and they were circled by long dark lashes, and they were intense, as if they were looking in her very soul. Lord Brandon, she breathed out, and he smiled at her, a small curved smile that made her heart stutter. Your highness, he greeted back, holding her hand perhaps a little more than was proper. You are a vision for sore eyes, he offered before stepping back as the greeting part of her welcome was over. Please, your highness, Lady Lyra offered, if you'd like I would be honored to escort you to the chambers we prepared for you. And we'd all be honored if you'd grace us with your presence to the small banquet we have organized to welcome you to Winterfell. Vielle nodded her head, bowing her head a bit and following the woman as she gestured for to follow her inside. Lady Stark was kind and gentle. She escorted her inside the gloomy-looking keep. That inside was warmer than she would have expected, and candle lit in such a way that it made her feel the warmth of home. I have chosen for you, your highness, the woman told her, the warmest chambers in all the keep, to help you adjust to our autumns. Thank you, my lady, she said, nodding, clearly touched both I and my lady in waiting, the Lady Shara Hightower. Thank you kindly for your generosity. Don't be silly, my dear, the woman told her with a dismissive gesture. It is our pleasure to host you here in Winterfell. Vielle smiled softly at the woman, and she smiled right back at her. There was no false courtesy, neither in her tone, neither in her words. She felt for one single moment truly appreciated by this hard folk that she had never met before. She had searched for a home for all of her life. King's Landing had felt like home. For a while, Dragonstone felt too stiff for her, too gloomy, and when she had finally returned to the capital, it too had changed and did not feel like home. It was colder than the winds that swept the pale north. Here she did not feel at home yet, but she could see that she could grow to feel at home in such a place. She smiled softly as Lady Sharia came to walk with them after having exited the carriage and having been escorted inside too. Your highness, we should get you out of that damp clothes, she said, if we don't want you to fall ill your first night here. Vielle rolled her eyes heavenward and forced herself not to look in Lady Stark's eyes. Had she done so, she was sure she would have seen suspicious and probably delusion. She couldn't bear it, especially when the woman had been, until now, so warm and welcoming. She turned to Shara and exhaled. Of course, my lady, she offered. Why don't you precede me inside, she asked, and Lady Shara knew better than to protest with her dismissal. She merely bowed to both her and her future mother-in-law and followed a servant inside the chamber the woman had just shown them. I am afraid, she admitted, turning to the woman, that I have been coddled most of my life. She tried to give her best grin, but I assure you, my lady, she added, I am in perfect health since I have stepped foot on Dragonstone many years past, and I have yet to fall ill again since then. She knew news of her frail health was bound to have reached all corners of the realm. Still, she hoped no one would question it as outwardly as Shara had done. Sometimes she asked herself if her lady-in-waiting took some sort of joy in belittling her so with the excuse of her disposition. Lady Stark smiled sweetly. I am sure you will acclimate very well to the north, your highness, she offered with a small smile as Lord Benjamin came to her side with a small smile in her direction and his eyes dark and full of wonder fixed on her pale face. Yes, my son, his mother asked him. Benjamin just shrugged. Father and Brandon are in the Godswood, he told her as if it was some cryptic signal, and let me guess, your sister has decided to try and sneak a peek, she said in a tone of fond nuisance. Vielle watched as Lord Benjamin blushed and nodded, and his mother rolled her eyes before fisting her gowns and doing a small courtesy. Please, excuse me, your highness, she said, my son can very well escort you the rest of the way to your chambers, she added. I have a daughter to catch. Of course she smiled. Thank you for your kind welcome, she added as the woman turned tail and started to walk very fastly down the corridor in guise of not running. She then followed Lord Benjamin, who looked to be quite excited by the prospect of escorting her to her chambers, smiling softly at the boy's excitement. What happens in the Godswood? I have never been to one. Is it as peaceful as they say? Lord Benjamin shrugged. It is our true home, he said to her cryptically. Beside, you will be married in the Godswood. You shall see for yourself. She blinked, surprised by the certainty in his tone. I will, she asked. Won't I and your brother be married under the light of the seven? She added, surprised. She knew the North kept the old gods, but she also knew that many keeps had a temple and a septon and various septars, so she had sort of been sure that she would be married like all of her ancestors under the light of the seven. Lord Benjamin shrugged again. We don't follow the new gods, he told her. We are of the North and here we follow the old gods. Brandon could never be married in a way different than the old way. But, she wanted to say, I am a Targaryen of Dragonstone. I was born under the light of the seven. What about the gods I follow? Here we are, Lord Benjamin signaled, gesturing to the door to their left. You will like the chambers very much, believe me, he offered before scrambling away with an odd bow. Vielle blinked and watched him go. What a strange boy, she thought, entering the chambers they had assigned to her. They were Spartan, but there was a bookshelf with many books assembled quite recently by the looks of it, and a good stock of candles. It looked like her love for late reading had indeed reached the northern borders of the realm, she thought, fingering the books on the shelves. There was a big window by which was a big bed, not as big as hers in King's Landing, but big enough and soft enough looking. There was a strange roaring watery noise coming from the walls, so experimentally she touched her hand to the stone, retracting it in surprise. The walls of stone were not cold as she had expected, but quite warm indeed. She took courage and pressed her ear to the wall, pressing her cold cheek to the warm stone wall, and could hear the roaring of the water beneath the stone wall. She had read in a book that Winterfell had been built above hot springs and that it was the warmest keep of the North, but until that moment she hadn't given that information much credit. She had been wrong. She felt like a small child, full of wonder as she flattened her hands to the wall and let the warmth seep into her. Then noise from below attracted her attention, and Vielle stepped away from the wall, walking to the window and looking out. Her gaze immediately found him. He was walking with long, powerful strides, a long sword strapped to his back, and his face was stained with blood, but he seemed to be unharmed. Lord Ricard followed closely, and he had an ashen face, but he too looked unharmed. Your Highness. Close that window. And, are you still in those damp clothes? Lady Shera's shrill voice made her jump out of her skin. Gods be good, we should dry you presently. Vielle sighed but closed the window and retreated inside the room to be coddled by her lady-in-waiting. Brandon Ice fell on the neck of the deserter and severed head from body in one clean cut. It wasn't the best sword for an execution, what with not being round-edged like the execution blades, but it held the right significance as it had been bathed with the blood of traitors since the beginning of time. They called it also the Blade of the North, and so justice in the North, if administered by a Stark, was to be given with ice. The body fell, the severed head rolled a few feet in grassy undergrowth of the Godswood, almost to the small, dark pool that sat at the feet of the altar beneath the heart tree. He could feel the blood on his face, the traitor's blood, as he took the cloth offered by his father and cleaned the blade of the long sword in silence. Only the winds hissed and rustled among the crimson leaves of the heart tree. Its face seeping the dark amber from its eyes and mouth, dark and almost crimson against the white of the trunk. Let's put the body on the altar, he said as he was helped by his father and Roderick Castle to bring the body on the stone altar that many said Brandon the Builder had built first in the Godswood before enclosing it in the walls of the keep. The head he called. Roderick Castle took it by the ear and offered it to him. Brandon took it too and closed its eyes, resting it against the chest of the body it had been severed from. He covered its eyes with the cloth stained with blood from the blade of his long sword, and then he turned to Roderick, who was holding the torch in his gloved hand. Brandon was without gloves. He did not feel the chill in the air and the cold did not bother him. He accepted the torch and turned to the others. Step back, he ordered, and both his father and Roderick obeyed immediately. Nating su izindi in Siabadons von Iken Raestra izindi shader, he said solemnly as he lit body and head on the altar. No honor has the man who leaves his post when the road darkens, the old tongue words for the deserters of the watch. His father and Roderick Castle echoed as they watched the body being engulfed by the flame. It was an old ritual they still abided to, a ritual of the first men. burning the dead as after a blood sacrifice to the old gods so that the gods may forgive the slight done to their oath by man and do not take away their blessing on the first men. Silent as a ghost, its paws pad foot even against the leaves on the ground, the imposing mole of Charlotte padded to him, standing at his side. The dire wolf was big, bigger than a horse, so great and imposing that his head was 4 times that of a man and that his impressive mole was so that he was as tall on 4 paws as Brandon was, and he stood a good 6'1-6'11 feet. He was one of the tallest men in the north save for the Umbers, and they claimed to descend from the giants. Charlotte's head nudged his and his damp, cold snout bumped his bearded cheek. The burrowed a hand in the dark coal-black fur of the beast and merely let his breath go in sync with the dire wolf's, letting his eyes never left the fire engulfing the body. They watched the body until it became ash, and when it did they dispersed the ashes in the dark pool at the feet of the heart tree. When finally they had been done, he turned to Charlotte and petted him. The dire wolf did not like to be treated like a domestic dog, yet sometimes Brandon found that he searched comfort in the beast who left him find it by petting him. Charlotte thought Bert the duty despite his eyes being as cold as the north. Brandon asked himself what he would do without him. The wolf may be only a beast to a many eyes, but to him he was a friend and a confidant. The one he could go for comfort now that the north, and the responsibility that went with it, started to settle on his shoulders. Unbidden an image came to his mind. A Targaryen princess, clad in her house colors, the deep crimson red of blood and ink black of the coal upon her silver-maned mare, riding inside the gates of Winterfell, her long, curly moonlight hair gently swept by the winds, her cheeks made pink by exertion and her pretty blush when he had greeted her, kissing her hand. He smiled thinking of the way her cheeks had pinked when he had complimented her, the way she had breathed out his name with those full heart-shaped rosy lips of hers. Those bright amethyst eyes had looked at him in a way that had made him smile wholeheartedly for the first time in many moons. His betrothed. When his father had first told him he had started talk of a betrothal with the princess of House Targaryen, Brandon had been bluffed at best. Normally a Northman's daughter would have been chosen for the role of Lady Stark, that since the time of Brandon the Builder. He had thought, like many did still, that his father had set his sight too southward and was forgetting how closely knit with the land they were. There had never been a non-North woman beside a Stark man. He had asked himself if that was why the North seemed to have chosen him while his father was still Lord of Winterfell. He had been skeptical even when his youngest brother had told him that their father was doing the right thing. But with Benjen being a green seer and one of the strongest of his generation, he had started doubting his own skepticism. He had then trekked around the Wolf's Wood for almost a moon to talk to the children of the forest about it. And when they, also, had seemed on board with the idea, he had returned to Winterfell with a less heavy heart, knowing that probably this was exactly what the North itself wanted. Thought his skepticism had returned when he had been told that the girl was considered of frail health and that she had spent many years away from court. He had been fascinated by the girl in the painting the crown had sent them of the princess. But paintings could lie, and she could indeed be a small, little and ill girl. Although from all accounts she was said to be of sweet disposition and quite kind. Still, accounts could lie too. So he had been pleased beyond measure when his betrothed had rode inside Winterfell atop her mare, her hair in disarray and her chin held high. She had dispersed by just doing so any suspect he had on her frail disposition. She had looked gentle and sweet in the way she had greeted them all, demure and kind, exactly as she had been described when he had asked recounts on his betrothed. She was so tiny, small of frame and lithe that he towered over her with his almost 6'11 feet of height. He could very well enclose her small, lithe frame in his, and none would be the wiser. Her hand had been so much smaller than his that he had felt like a giant, and one of the strongest sense of protection he had ever felt had caught him off guard. She was funny too, if the way she had replied to Benjen's excitement was of any indication. That had surprised him because he had been waiting for a stuck-up princess. Instead he had gotten a woman that seemed to be invariably kind. She had even taken the time to ask around for the Stark children interest if the comment she had offered Lyanna were of any indication. "You seem happy," Roderick commented, falling into step with him as they walked back to the keep. "Does this mean you approve of your betrothed?" Brandon grinned. He said, thinking back on the way her rosy lips had moved when spelling his name. They looked like rose petals, they did, and he was curious, would they also taste like the rosebuds they looked like? Would her skin taste of roses or some other flower of the south? Roderick shrugged. "Well, she is indeed quite beautiful, if you like the delicate, Gentle kind, he commented, and Brandon let out a laugh, for if one thing had always gained him jest was his love for delicate things he invariably would break. He only hoped this princess to be tougher than she looked. But he had the feeling he would be surprised by her every time. They had arrived back to the grounds when he and Roderick bid each other farewell as his friend returned to his post as guard, and he walked back to the keep, his father hot on his heels. "You and the princess will be married soon," he said, approaching, and Brandon rolled his eyes. "May I at least know her a bit before binding myself to her wholeheartedly," he whispered back, and his father grunted. "Don't be foolish," he said. "This is the chance of a lifetime for us," he told him. "With this marriage all will know that House Stark is powerful and strong, because even the crown conceded us its only princess." "You know how many times it happened before?" he asked. And Brandon shook his head. "I am sure you are about to tell me, father." "Less cheek and more respect from you, young man," his father snapped. "I am your father and your lord liege still. Brandon bent his head a bit to concede his point as his father continued. "Never to a northern house," he said. "The last great house that was given a Targaryen bride, the only princess at the time, is House Martell. We are of equal footing with them with this marriage, you must understand this. Brandon rolled his eyes but stayed silent. "You will marry that girl," his father said, pointing an accusing finger in his direction. "Are we clear?" "Crystal," he nodded, straightening. From his height he towered even over his own father. "Beside, my lady mother seems convinced she is the right one to be the next lady of Winterfell, and I shall always trust her judgment," he added before storming away from his pale-faced father without looking back. Brandon entered the keep, immediately finding himself face to face with the pouting lips of his sister. Lyanna was sat on the stone floor, her feet tucked beneath the fabric of her pale grey gown, and she was staring off in the distance with that air of anger that often characterized her. He sighed and softly sat down next to her. "You are aware you have blood on your face, aren't you?" she asked in lieu of greeting. He didn't reply, merely looked directly in front of them. The people that passed them didn't even bother to ask if they needed anything, for the oldest of the children of Lord Rickard was often seen consoling his siblings and just sharing in their quirks. "What would your lady think about you going around with blood on your face?" she muttered, clearly displeased and not afraid to make it known. "Probably she'd tell you to wipe it away, would faint at the sight of blood, too," she added. Brandon frowned. "Why are you so determined to dislike her?" he asked. "She has been polite and kind enough," he pointed out. "Oh," Lyanna nodded. "She has been polite and kind enough. Because we all know that that is what is needed to be Lady of Winterfell. Our mother is polite and kind too," he quipped, arching a brow as to defy her to say it not true. Lyanna shrugged. "And she is also a green seer," she reminded him. "What does this southern have that any girl of the north does not?" she questioned. "Will she also be included in our sacred rituals when the daughter of Winterfell is excluded?" she pondered out loud. Brandon didn't say anything at first. "I know you are braver than any of us, Lyanna," he told her, "but not even I would want you to partake in such a sight. But she will, won't she?" she asked bitterly. And Brandon had resolved to never lie to his siblings, no matter the circumstances. She will, as will be her duty. Lyanna exhaled a shaky breath and looked directly in front of herself, tears glistening on her cheeks as she held at bay her sobs. "Sometimes I wish I was born a male," she said. "I would not be excluded from our rituals, and I would be left free to take up arms and fight with my brothers instead of sitting home and knitting by the fire," she added. "But if you had, you would not have been our Lyanna," he told her, nudging her shoulder with his, making sure not to instill much strength in the gesture, "and it would a terrible pity." That did make her smile, and Brandon smiled too as she tucked her raven-haired head on his shoulder and beneath his chin. "I love you, big brother," she murmured, and Brandon passed an arm around her shoulders, smiling softly and kissing the air around her hair. "And are you, my little she-wolf?" They stayed like that for much time until it was time for them to prepare for the welcoming feast. Before letting him go, Lyanna embraced him tight. "I don't like her," she told him. "Be careful around her, even a beautiful dragon can still breathe fire." The great hall of Winterfell was alight with many candles that burned and tinted the room of a golden light. Brandon was sat at his father's right while his lady mother was sat at his left. At her left sat Lyanna, who looked quite pretty in her bluish-grey dress, while Benjen was seated at Lyanna's side. The doors finally opened and the princess entered the hall at her brother's arm. Sir Blackfyra wore a coal-black doublet and pants, and he was unarmed, at least openly. Brandon noticed their stance to be stiffer than when Brandon walked Lyanna during important feast down the hall. When he accompanied Lyanna, they would often be talking in hushed tones, their arms wrapped tightly around the others, their head bent together to whisper about their guests. Princess Avilia and her brother did not look as mushy, although one could see the affection and fondness shining of both of their eyes. They were stiff, their elbows did not touch, and the princess rested her hand above the hand of her brother, palm against knuckles, almost a feet of space between their bodies, their backs straight and their chin held high. Evermore the black dragon walked a step behind his sister, and Brandon thought it must be because he was a Blackfyr and not a Targaryen. The princess looked divine, clad in a vibrant crimson gown that hugged her figure and enhanced her small waist, so small in fact that Brandon could picture it would suffice only one of his hands to actually enclose it with a Valyrian steel belt that resembled a dragon, which mouth rested at her right hip. She had let her silvery hair bounce freely down her back, the frontal tresses twisted away from her moon-shaped face, a small braid dangling in front of her left breast adorned with silver beads. Her brother did not look less royal by her side, and none could mistake him for anyone but someone with Targaryen blood, for his dark amethyst eyes sold him away. Brandon stood up with the rest of his family and the rest of the guests, who took turns in watching and commenting on the princess' appearance. They had stopped walking down the hall, and the princess clasped her hands demurely in front of herself while her brother stood a step back. "Lord Stark," the princess said politely, doing an elegant courtesy. "Lady Stark, I thank you kindly for your hospitality and this beautiful welcoming feast you have decided to grace us with," she said, a small smile on her full lips. Brandon found that when she talked he almost stopped listening and could do nothing but stare at those rosebud's lips of hers, wondering how they'd feel against his skin. "It's entirely much more than we deserve," she added, the courtesy spilling from her sensual mouth as if she wasn't even aware of the effect she had on him, on every hot-blooded male in the room, he was sure, as she spoke with such a grace. "It is you, your highness, that does us honor with your presence," his lord father said, gesturing for the free seat by Brandon's side. "Please, we reserved you and your noble brother a seat." The smile the princess gave them was grateful and blinding, while the black dragon looked like he had just witnessed a miracle, and probably he had, because despite being a royal bastard he was still a bastard, and so he must not have often sat at the high table. She exchanged a look with her brother, who offered her his hand again to help her step up on the dais on which the high table was placed, and Brandon followed her steps as she came closer with his eyes. Her brother escorted her to her seat at his side, taking the one at hers, and helped her sit down in doing so, though Brandon's hand, as if moved by its own will, was offered too. He would have blushed had he been a green boy, and maybe he did when she took hold of his hand with one of hers as she adjusted her gown as not to step on it while sitting down, as if it was as natural as breathing. She smiled softly in his direction, and Brandon felt his heart thundering in his chest as it did after a good duel on the training grounds. He sat only after she had too, and had let out a soft "Thank you, my lord." She ate dainty, with elegance, and munched on small morsels of food, and always commented on it as if it was the best delicacy she had ever tasted. She was especially fond, he discovered, of the honeyed meat that was served during the second course, and her brother jested with her, commenting on her sweet tooth, to which she had responded easily with a bright smile. "At least I am not a fan of sour," she added, "or my face would be as sour as yours, oh brother of mine." When the third course was done with, the bard started to sing and people started to assemble around to move the tables to start dancing all around. As soon as the music became more lively and Lyanna swept a struggling Benjen down to dance together, Brandon turned to the princess, noticing she was drumming her fingers along with the beat of the music. "Do you sing, your highness?" he asked her, and she turned her bright amethyst's eyes on him, smiling softly if a bit embarrassed. "I am afraid I am a merely passable singer, but not near as decent as Selhino here, and certainly not as good as Roriga," she told him with a sweet smile. "She is being modest," her brother intervened. "She is quite a singer." The princess turned to her brother with a glare, but he merely raised his glass to her. She turned back to him. "Ignore him. It's the wine talking." "You should sing something then," he said, hoping she would indeed, for if her singing voice was as graceful as her normal voice she would be indeed quite talented. She smiled back at him. "There is no drink strong enough to compel me to sing before such an esteemed audience, my lord," she said, raising her cup as if to toast at him. "Besides, I am without my harp," she said, "and I am afraid that without I have a scarce sense of the music beat." "Mayhap another time, then," he offered, and she smiled softly at him before nodding. "Mayhap," she conceded, before a wild grinning Benjen came stumbling to them and offered her his hand. Brandon was quite impressed by his brother's attempt, and the princess looked to be quite as astounded as touched when he asked her to dance. "Why, my lord," she said, getting on her feet and accepting his hand, "I would be most honored by such a valiant soul who would brave have his feet stepped on." Brandon watched her go with his grinning brother and frowned when they started dancing, and she proved to be a great dancer, graceful and elegant, vibrant and vivid, her crimson dress dancing with her steps as if the rest of the hall was discolored in front of her. She is a precious jewel. Stark he turned, finding the dark amethyst, lucid eyes of Sir Blackfear boring into his. She is my only sister and the littlest of 4 siblings. If her heart is broken she will be avenged. Brandon nodded, appreciating the direct manner of the man. I hope not to hurt her, he said. See that you don't, or whatever frozen hell your gods send you to will look like mercy. The knight told him, his stone face severe, his lips set in a grim line. He would have wanted to bark a laugh at his threat, but he also had a sister and he knew that if she was in the princess place, about to get married, Brandon would much the same Sir Blackfear was doing now. Brandon watched as the princess was then offered a dance, a more sedated one by his father. Brandon was quite sure it should have been the first dance of the evening, that of his father, the Lord Warden and the princess, but she didn't look displeased at all by the way the evening was going, so he would not worry about it. Brandon watched her dance a couple of songs more, always with Benjen, as none others dared to ask her after her dance with his lord father was done. She is quite a beauty, he turned as his mother took his lord father's place at his side, a small smile on her lips. She brought her ale to her lips and smiled, watching the princess indulge Benjen, and she seems great with kids too. Brandon looked at the princess as she laughed when Benjen overstepped the dance and almost lost his balance. She seems gentle, he offered, trying hard not to picture the way she would look when indeed she had a child of her own. His child. Since he had been grown enough to know what he wanted from women, Brandon had never thought of sewing a child. He had been in love like any green boy of 5 and 10 could be at the time, but had never thought of children. He knew they would come when it was the time, so he had not even worried about it when he had laid with his many conquests. He was used to imagine beautiful women, seeing them lying beneath him in throes of pleasure, and yet he had never imagined them with a child born of his seed. She does, his mother nodded, and there is much dignity in her, she added with that preternatural knowledge she often displayed. She will be a good wife. Will I grow to love her? He asked, observing as her brother offered her his arm for a new dance. This one had a southern accent to it and it was quite choreographed. The two of them moved in perfect sync and looked like darkness and light mixing together as they danced around each other. For every step of one the other matched his own. The princess twirled around herself and around her dance partner, her crimson gown sweeping around her on the floor, her small beaded braid shining in the candle light. His mother was observing him observe her with a small smile on her lips. The song ended and the princess stopped for a moment, her hair a bit in disarray, her cheeks tinted pink for the exertion, and she was a bit panting after the dance. And he could just picture her, he knew, panting, the porcelain expense of her skin bare to see, the curve of her lithe waist, every dip, every service on her body perfectly molding despite being so small against his. He forced his gaze away from her bright amethyst eyes and caught his lady mother knowing grin. Do you really want to know? She asked with a mischievous glint in her warm eyes, or you'd rather find out on your own? Brandon rolled his eyes and looked back at his betrothed, who was returning to the high table escorted by her brother. You lied, your highness, he told her in a jovial tone. You are indeed a great dancer. We should have been more worried about your feet due to my brother's clumsiness than of his. She smiled, gulping down a sip of her wine. When she turned to him she was still smiling. Why, my lord, she teased, it almost sounds as if you were worried. Brandon smiled and rolled his eyes but said nothing, just enjoying her presence by his side as her brother ventured down the hall, probably in search of other company. So, your highness, he begun, how are you finding the north? Is it up to your liking? He asked, awaiting in bated breath for her reaction. Could he live with someone who didn't respect, love and cared for the north? She did not even hesitate. I find it raw, she said, as if mulling her words very well, and strangely enchanting. She said it's different, she said it's exactly as I have been told, and so much more. What did they tell you, before departing King's Landing, I mean? The princess shrugged a bit before replying. Sir Jaime, he was telling me of how it was flat and boring, pale, murky and muddy. Suppose I should not have believed him since he has never been here himself, she added with a dreamy look on her beautiful face. Sir Jaime, he asked, feeling suddenly suspicious of the woman before him. Did she have a lover back in King's Landing? The smile on her full lips certainly suggested she did feel something for this Jaime fellow, whoever he was. Yes, she added, Sir Jaime of House Lannister. She told him he is a knight of the King's Guard. She told him the youngest to have ever served, she added, and a good friend of mine. His father had once broached talk of a marriage between us, but Jaime always dreamt of becoming a knight of the King's Guard. My brother Oregon knighted him. So, was the light brightening her eyes only fondness of a friend? And she added as if she hadn't noticed his inner turmoil that was a relief. Nor I, nor Jaime could see each other as anything other than friends. Thought Lord Lannister seemed determined to have an in with House Targaryen. He even offered his daughter, the Lady Cersei, to the youngest of my brothers, Inez, who is 2 years younger than her. She fingered her little braid and played with her beads for a moment. Back on the topic, she said, I find it riveting, as if its raw beauty could speak louder than any poem ever wrote. There is something enchanting about something so wild and free, she added, still looking over the hole but finally looking over to him too, a small smile on her full lips. I hadn't expected it, she told him, but it feels right, being here, in the north. Its coldness seems to wash away every worry. Brandon smiled broadly, touched by the way she had described his homeland. Thought coming from the south the princess seemed to be truly enjoying the north, and that was already a step in the right direction. The silence between them was not heavy, it was easy, thought pregnant, as if there was much to be spoken of and no real need to speak it at all, as if somehow it didn't need to be spoke of because they just knew naturally, instinctively. After some minutes, thought she spoke. She was fingering the rim of her goblet of wine, still half full. He noticed and was watching her brother with a small smile on her lips. Thank you, she said. I cannot put in words how grateful I am that my brother was let dine with us this evening. He was clearly touched too. Brandon did not look away from her as she looked at her brother mingle with the crowd as if he was made for this type of company. She then turned to him and in her eyes shone unshed tears as she smiled at him. He is your brother, he said to her. He shall always be welcome at our table, he offered. She smiled softly at him and in attempt of boldness she rested her hand on his on the table. Thank you, my lord. She squeezed his hand and was about to let go when Brandon turned his hand around and gripped hers back. It was so small, and clearly warm, and his hand almost dwarfed it. It was soft, and after a first moment of surprise she gripped his hand back with a small embarrassed smile. He felt engrossed into it and just merely enjoyed her touch for a while until it lasted. Chapter 2, Nedi and Viel 2. Summary. Another double chapter, the last for a little bit. In this we get a short glimpse in Ned life in the Vale and we see how Viel and Brandon start the first steps in their acquaintance. Laughing smiley. Notes. So here is the chapter, let me know if you like it. The wedding and first night will be told by Brandon POV so we understand better also what happened in this chapter when Charlotte, which should mean something like Fang or Claw, named that for the claw mark he has on his snout, showed himself to the princess and let her pet him and demanded her attention. He is of the north after all. Winking smiley. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Nedi. He curled his hands around the parchment, then stood up and quietly threw it in the fire. No one would have noticed him too if Robert's eyes had not been on him the entire time. His friend sighed and came to sit by him, offering him a pint of ale. Ned accepted it in silence and Robert drank from his without speaking for a long while, then he set his pint down and looked at him with his penetrating blue gaze. What happened? Is your father displeased with you? He might as well be, he muttered. Contrary, the Princess of Ilia has arrived to Winterfell. She and Brandon will marry presently. So, his friend asked as he drowned what remained of his ale in one single long gulp. So I thought that with Brandon happily married with the princess from the south my father would have left me alone about betrothals, he said unhappily. Robert smirked. Let me guess. He didn't. Ned shook his head. He seems even more resolute that I should marry the daughter of Lord Tully in the Riverlands. He said he is determined that the betrothal shall be signed as soon as possible. Robert snickered. You poor brooding sod, he said, giving him a mastodontic pat to the back, almost making him spit the ale he had just gulped down. I don't see why you are so grim. They say she is lovely, and she looked lovely indeed in the painting they sent you, didn't she? He asked. Besides, in the darkness you can close your eyes and just concentrate on her body if you find her face displeasing. And there was his best friend. A man of insatiable appetites that rivaled with Brandon's really, and who had a fair success with the gentler folk too. Ned could not say he had the same drive as either Brandon or Robert. He was the master of his desires, and though he was no virgin he knew well enough that he was indeed a green boy if compared to either his brother in truth or his brother in heart. Still, it was not that he found Lady Catelyn displeasing, not at all. She was quite beautiful in a sort of comely way, but Ned found he thought she lacked something. He could not say what, but though he was sure she would make a most esteemed and good wife, he thought she perhaps lacked the fire he felt he needed to keep him warm in those cold nights that would come. No, Ned was no Brandon. He had not received the same blessings by the north, which was why he was the one who had been sent to the Vale instead of his brother who had stayed behind in Winterfell. Everyone had known since the day his brother had returned from his lie at Camus, the ritual in which the Starks partook as a coming of age, with his mastodontic direwolf, that Brandon had the blessing of the North. It had been generations since there had been a direwolf in Winterfell, and although Charlotte came and went as he pleased, he was often seen by his brother's side. When Ned's turn had come, he had survived his coming of age but had returned without direwolf, and he had known. Brandon was full of wolf blood, while Ned had been nicknamed since childhood the Quiet Wolf, for he was less prone to anger and rage and liked to discuss things through instead that smash things around himself. From that day on he had known. He would never be enough, not in his people's eyes, not in his lord father's, and although his lady mother was gentle and still loved him strongly, she had been the one to suggest he was to go south. He had felt betrayed by her too. The only one who did understand was Lyanna, but Lyanna was just a girl, and his sister had been his rock during the time in which he had believed to be worth nothing next to his brothers. Brandon was blessed by the North and Benjen by the old gods. What with being a green seer, he and Lyanna had kindled over being the normal children of House Stark. Lyanna was a girl, and despite the fact that more often than not Stark women were green seer or healers, she was neither. Ned was the second-born, neither meat neither fish, a sort of middle finger that stuck out awkwardly in the North. In the Vale he had found a place. Lord Arryn loved both him and Robert as if they were his sons, and in Robert Ned had found a confidant, a friend and a brother of heart. When news had come that Brandon was to be married to the Targaryen princess, Ned had thought that perhaps his lord father would finally stop breathing down his neck about his own betrothal. He had been wrong. If his father's word was to be believed, Lord Hoster Tully had all but accepted Ned's courtship for his daughter Lady Catelyn of House Tully without he even meeting the woman at all. For his father it wasn't enough that his son would be now down in line for the Iron Throne should all male heirs of Aerys fail by being married with Aerys' only daughter. No, he wanted his son to link House Stark with a powerful house in the south, and whom better than House Tully? The Silver Trouts. A wolf and a trout. It was ridiculous. A wolf and a dragon, now that looked like to have the making of a good song. But his brother had gotten them too. And Ned was happy if he would find happiness with the princess, for he loved his brother dearly despite everything. But was Ned destined to be forever second? He would marry Lady Catelyn, of that there was little doubt, he thought, and that would be fine and dandy, but Ned wasn't entitled to a bit of romance, of chase himself. If you want, his friend said, we can run away. Go to Essos, become mercenaries, live the adventure and leave all this talks of betrothals behind us. What about Storm's End? Stannis can have it. You and me, my friend, will have the world. Robert said, gesturing around with a loud laugh. Ned would have liked to believe him, but he knew better by now. Vielle too. Life at Winterfell was calm in a way her life had yet to be, and Vielle had found that despite her most Targaryen looks, she fitted almost better here than back home in King's Landing, where all the courtesans had seen was a pawn. The Starks didn't treat her as such, even if she knew she was. She was a princess after all, and that meant that she would never be seen as anything but a vantageous match. She knew this, and yet in Winterfell she had felt welcomed and treated as a human being. Lord Ricard was clearly proud of having snatched such a match for his firstborn, and despite him being quite polite, Vielle knew types like him, and she tried to steer clear of him, since he did indeed treat her like a precious pawn he had snatched for his family. Lady Lyra and Lord Benjen on the other hand were clearly happy to have her there, and they often sought her out to pass time with her, while Lady Lyanna looked to try very hard to either avoid her completely or trying to set fire to her by just looking at her. Vielle felt compelled to talk to the girl, but she was like vapor. One moment she was there, the next she would be gone, and she had other things that occupied her time. Like the finishing touch of the ceremony. No one had told her it would have taken place in the Godswood, the place where the Northmen prayed to their gods, and she had been tempted to at least ask that at least a prayer could be said to her gods during the wedding celebration. But all those to whom she had tried to talk about it, namely Lord Benjen and Lady Stark, had told her she would love her Northman fashion celebration. They said it too with such a certainty that Vielle almost believed them. She had seen Lord Brandon alone only one time, and it had been by pure chance. She had been in Winterfell Library, and the Maester of the Keep, the young man from the Citadel who had been present that first day, had left to find some parchments and tomes about northern history as per her request, and had left her to explore on her own. Lady Shara had not been with her by some miracle, really, as the woman had scarcely let her breath, neither was her brother, who was most probably down the training grounds. She had always been the kind of person who first felt a book by touch, so she was fingering the rims of said books, all ordinarily put on their shelves, when one had caught her eye, mostly because it was written in a strange runic writing. At least the title was the undertitle read, in Western, House of the Wolf, and she had tried to reach for it, but being no taller than 9 feet, even standing on her tiptoes, she couldn't grasp it. Her fingers could almost touch it, but not grab it. She was huffing and puffing out of patience when a strangely cold hand had set around her waist, making her still. A moment later she had been lifted in the air as if she was no heavier than feather. Vielle had almost shrieked from the surprise, but a deep, velvety voice had calmed her down almost immediately. "Easy there, Your Highness," Lord Brandon had admonished her. She had blushed to the roots of her hair, but had nonetheless grabbed the tone that had attracted her so. When he still didn't seem to want to put her down, she had offered, timidly, "You can put me down now, my lord." "My apologies," he had scrambled to reply, setting her back on her feet. Vielle had found her balance soon enough and had found herself face to chest with her betrothed, who had still to move away from her. "None needed," she had offered back, and Lord Brandon had took a step back so that Vielle could look in his face without craning her neck up. He looked suspiciously red in the face, although it could be the cold from outside where he was bound to have been with hands so cold, and really his eyes were warm enough to let her feel slightly embarrassed and shy. That day Lord Brandon had offered to take her for a walk that afternoon if she so wished, with a chaperone of course, as being without would not have been proper at all, and so they had started to see each other daily, sharing long walks, usually in the glass gardens of Winterfell. Now, a scarce day before the wedding, Vielle had finally taken courage in both hands and decided to speak about the celebration of their wedding to Lord Brandon. She had yet to be left alone with her betrothed after that time in Winterfell's library, not that he had tried, and she meant to use their daily walk to actually try and talk to him about the fact that she would feel less uncomfortable if they could, at least, add one of 2 prayers from her religion to their ceremony. Lady Shara, as always, would accompany them. Thought she complained constantly about the cold even inside the glass gardens, and Vielle meant to leave her behind and have an one-to-one chat with her betrothed. With Lady Shara bothering about the cold, she and Brandon could very well shake her off with a small sprint. In those skirts, Shara, the ever-perfect ladylike Shara, would have many difficulties to actually follow them, and Vielle had every intention of talking with her betrothed on this matter alone. So she had chosen for today walk a simpler gown, a single skirt gown that would not hinder her movements when they made a dash for it. She had even braided her hair in a simpler way, leaving her face bare, curling the frontal tresses back. And thought Lady Shara had commented on how she was starting to dress like a northerner now, and she had said so with no small amount of displeasure. She didn't seem to suspect anything. Lord Brandon, as always, was waiting for her outside her chambers. He was almost as big as the door frame itself, and sometimes Vielle didn't know how he actually fitted through the doors. He looked a giant for all that she was used to tall, slender men. He was bulky and seemed to be only muscle upon layer of muscles. Yet his eyes were kind and often brightened when she would appear for their afternoon walk, as they did in that moment. "Your Highness," he greeted her with a small bow. Vielle smiled and offered her hand in greeting. "My lord," he kissed her knuckles and then tucked her hand inside the service of his elbow. "Us northerners do it this way," he had instructed her the first time they had walked together, to Lady Shara's chagrin, for no unwed woman was to be touched so in the south by a man. But Vielle found his way to be warmer, and she felt more happy than the stiffer way they southerners did it. They started walking, their paces matching, despite Lord Brandon surely need to slow down for her since his legs were so much longer than hers. "How are you today, Your Highness?" he asked. "The big day is coming." Vielle smiled softly, a bit nervous perhaps. "My lord." "What about you?" she asked, looking at him under her lashes. "You are still in time to flee, you know," she offered with a small smile. Lord Brandon let out a full belly laugh. As in many other things, she had seen that Lord Brandon did nothing halfway. If he laughed, he would laugh with gusto. If he trained, he would give the 100%. Not that she had been admitted near the training grounds by Lady Shara, for it was not proper of a woman of her rank. He seemed to be a fan of the phrase "go big." "I am afraid the memory of you," he said, "left alone at the altar would haunt me forever, Your Highness," he jested back, and Vielle shared with him a small private smile. "Oh, I really would," she said, smiling. "Haunt you, that is. My ghost would probably murder you." Lord Brandon smiled too. "It would probably be the most beautiful ghost to ever haunt a man," he told her, and Vielle smiled brightly before blushing a bit. "Adulator," she said. "Do this kind of talk get you in bed with many women?" she asked, using her conversational skills. As they walked, she heard Lady Shara sigh. The woman had often told her that it was under her rank to use such tricks to get the information she should be given without pause because she was princess, but Vial liked a lively, good conversation and she saw no ill in playing a bit coy despite blushing to the roots of her hair for the way he looked at her after that last comment. She was shy but not without fire. She was still a Targaryen after all. She was timid by nature, but that didn't mean she didn't know how to converse. He rested his hand above hers. It was so much bigger and cold. Why he didn't wear any gloves she would never understand, and looked at her intently, with such an intensity that Vial could actually count the specks of maroon in his grey orbs. The breath got stuck in her throat when he bent his head down to whisper, a breath away from her face so close she could feel him exhale against her mouth slightly ajar, his eyes passing from her lips to her amethyst eyes. Wouldn't you like to know, Your Highness? Like it had come. The moment passed and he straightened back as they neared the glass gardens. They still talked of matters of scarce importance when something attracted her attention. Are those? She asked, disentangling herself from his arm and going closer to the batch she was only now seeing. Lord Brandon put his hands behind his back, and if she would have looked closely she could have seen his hands fisting as if he was forcing himself not to reach out for her, and came closer with a small smile. Winter roses. She turned back to him with a bright smile. I only ever saw them at tournaments, she said, and those were usually less bright than these, she pointed out, feeling delighted as a small child. Brandon smiled, coming closer. They are in their habitat here, north, he told her, in the lands of always winter, and by the wall they grown wilder, bigger and more vibrant still. Vial turned to him and he smiled as if seeing that childlike wonder in her eyes made him happy. You know, there is a story about her undercover bard, a rose and a Stark lady, he told her. Really? She asked, and Lord Brandon nodded, fingering one of the blue petals. It sounds like a great story. Would you mind sharing, my lord? It is said that a lord of Winterfell, Brandon Stark, once called the king beyond the wall a coward, he told her, and Vial listened in silence. So the wilderling, to prove his courage, climbed the wall and took the king's road, getting inside of Winterfell, disguising himself as a singer from Skagos, he added, still fingering the blue petal, but his eyes never left her. He sang all night, and impressed by his singing abilities the lord offered him a boon. The wilderling asked for the most beautiful flower. Winterfell's gardens. He was a great storyteller because Vial was literally hanging from his lips, waiting for the next bit of the story, so the lord gave him a winter rose since they were just then blooming. The next day the daughter of the lord, his only child, was found missing on her bed, a single winter rose in her place. The Stark's men and brothers of the Night's Watch searched for the wilderling and the girl for many moons, yet without any success. Then he said one day the lady was found again in her chambers with an infant son who would become the next Lord Stark, he told her, finishing her tale. And what of the king beyond the wall and the lady? Did they ever meet again? She asked, feeling like a part of the story was missing. The end of their story is quite sad indeed, Your Highness, he told her. I'd wish to spare you such a sour story. Vial frowned. I think you forget to whom you are speaking, my lord, she told him. I am a Targaryen, I know my fair share of sad and sour stories, and this seems to be quite enchanting. What happened next? She asked. Lord Brandon studied her a bit, then sighed. As you wish. King Bale and the lady did never see each other again, not in life, that is. Years later the king beyond the wall led his army of wildlings south and battled his own son by the frozen ford, he told her. Unable to kill his own son, he let himself be killed instead. The son brought the head back to Winterfell as a trophy, and when he showed it to his mother, the lady, whom had loved the wilderling deeply, killed herself. Vial munched on it for a bit, then nodded. It is a sad story, she said, but enchanting nonetheless, although I now think I'd despair if one was to give me a winter rose as a token of his love. Brandon inclined his head to the side and watched her closely. And why? Their love was pure and true, but tragic, she said. I'd rather a plain daisy or any other flower, for I'd much rather to love and be loved in return with small tragedy. Lord Brandon nodded. Yet all epic loves are tragic, he told her, like with Queen Naerys and her Dragon Knight. I see you have studied Targaryen stories well, she said. Yes, but I'd rather a normal love, steady and true, than an epic one that burns quickly and ends tragically. All endings are tragic, he told her. Then I would hope for a very long and happy middle, she replied, than for an epic story that only feeds the bard's purses and not my heart. I'd rather be loved and forgotten than be in a tragic story and be forever remembered. He seemed to be studying her, then he finally spoke. It doesn't sound like a Targaryen thing to say. She gave him a small, rueful smile. It doesn't, does it? I am not the most Targaryen of my siblings, I am afraid. Fire and blood does not always sit well with me, she offered. Does this disappoint you, my lord? He shook his head. On the contrary. I find what you say sensible above all else, and we all need a little more sense in this life. Vial smiled. Even you, she jested, nudging him a bit with her shoulder. Lord Brandon laughed. What use have I of it, when I got you, your highness? He asked out loud, and Vial realized she had literally walked right into that and blushed to the very roots of her hair. She looked back at Lady Shara shuffling about and looking mighty bored. She almost felt sorry for her, before actually looking intently at her betrothed. She wet her lips and saw him follow that movement with his eyes for a moment before she asked, if I were to do something really not sensible, would you humor me? She asked in a whisper, her gaze returning to the bored face of her lady-in-waiting. Lord Brandon, to his credit, did not even hesitate. Always he promised, his tone serious, his face stony, but his lips did quirk a bit and his eyes shone with mirth. Vial smiled and took bravery with both hands and gripped his hand tight. Let's get out of here, she whispered before she started running, her grip of Lord Brandon's hand never wavering as he followed her lead almost without having to think. At a certain point, but still when the Your Highness's screeches of Lady Shara were audible, Lord Brandon took the lead, and Vial started to follow him. They left the glass garden and entered the Godswood, for as they had run he had brought her there. When they finally stopped, Vial was panting and laughing, and Lord Brandon, bless his soul, looked as if he didn't even broke a sweat and was merely watch her with eyes full of wonder. The rustling of the leaves, the wildlife singing in the background, the water running underneath the ground, it felt more peaceful than Vial had felt in her lifetime. She turned to her betrothed. Well, she said when she finally had enough breath to actually talk, I am not always sensible. And again they started laughing. She puffed away a strand of silver hair from her face as she bent her hands to her tights to catch her breath and finally straightened. That was fun, thought she added. I have not run away from her since before returning to King's Landing. Were you a difficult child, Your Highness? He asked suddenly, looking a bit peeved, if only in jest. I'll have you know, I was delightful, my lord, she told him in mock annoyance. Lord Brandon thought did not reply, merely coming closer. He twirled the curl that had escaped her braid around his rough finger and watched it as hypnotized for a while before tucking it behind her ear, following with a finger the profile of it. I couldn't fathom it any other way, he murmured, his finger trailing to her cheek and almost down the column of her neck. She felt the breath stuck in her throat. He realized only when her breath caught when his finger traced her neck that he had overstepped and took a step back, clearing his throat. May I ask if there was a reason we ran away from your lady-in-waiting and our chaperone? He queried. He was surprisingly gentle for a man of his imposing mole. Vial opened her mouth to speak, instead found herself looking around them. The winds rustling through the leaves seemed to almost speak and caressed her face too. She tried when she felt Lord Brandon gaze on her. So, this is the Godswood. Lord Brandon nodded. Don't you have one in King's Landing? He asked, his hands once again behind his back clasped tightly. Vial gripped her gun with both hands so that the skirts didn't trudge in the fallen leaves and mud of the ground and started exploring the place. We do, she said, but it is little, and it cannot hold a candle to such a beauty she offered. It is more of a garden than a Godswood, really. Lord Brandon followed her in her exploration as she looked around herself and started walking around as if her feet could carry her to her destination, still not knowing where she was going with her mind. They walked for a bit and Vial kept looking around, awed and amazed by the beauty of that wonderful place. It seemed to cloak them in warmth and acceptance as they walked around. Lord Brandon remained silent as they walked, and suddenly she stilled. A stony altar stood, proud and half covered in climbing ivy in bloom with small white flowers that seemed to rest on the flat of the altar. It was engraved with quibbles and runes and looked ancient, more than that, it felt ancient. The biggest tree of the Godswood stood proudly a couple of feet from the altar. It was white-branched and full of crimson leaves. There was a face engraved on it, a crying face covered in crimson amber. Is that? She asked, turning back to Lord Brandon, full of wonder. He smiled. That is the heart tree, he told her as she climbed the small hill that would lead to its roots. From its eyes the gods see all, and from its mouth they speak all. Vial gingerly touched the white wood, trailing with her fingers the natural engravings on the white surface. Does it really? She asked, turning to Lord Brandon again. Speak to you. Lord Brandon came closer, and he too rested his hand on the weirwood tree as he looked up to the rustling leaves. He replied softly, his molten eyes meeting her bright amethysts. They really do, although often we do not know how to listen to them. Vielle nodded, bringing her gaze back to the crying face of the tree. Is that why it looks so sad? Would it be laughing if we knew how to listen, she wondered. Lord Brandon shrugged. I don't know, he replied honestly. Sometimes I feel like they do not answer. She merely watched him, feeling this was a hard confession for him. He looked back to the rustling leaves again, but, in the moment of truth, he said, they do answer. I am glad, she told him, and he turned to face her, his face full of surprise for her reply. He probably awaited for a different response from her. We may not follow the same gods, she offered, but I can respect your religion. I can respect anyone's religion. I wouldn't rule out that we may be praying the same gods all around the world, just with different names, she added for good measure. He seemed to be left speechless, and Vielle knew that this was the time, the moment to actually ask. That is why she said, I would like to ask you something. Lord Brandon shook his head as if to dissipate some strange thought he must have had. Ask away, Your Highness. If it is in my power, I will grant it to you. Vielle smiled and clasped her hands before herself before stating, I am a Targaryen of Dragonstone, and I was born under the light of the Seven. She told him, I will gladly marry you before your weirdwood tree, she said, but, as I marry you in your way, I cannot in good conscience disregard my custom and my religion either. Lord Brandon was still silent. He did not look angry, so Vielle continued, that is why I would request, she said, if you think it fitting, to englobe at least part of the new god ceremony to our marriage. She told him, I would not ask if I did not think it necessary. I hear you, Your Highness, he told her, and you speak gracefully and from the bottom of your heart. Vielle nodded, and I would gladly grant you what you request. Vielle smiled, but I cannot let other gods bear witness of our marriage. Vielle frowned. Shouldn't including more gods sanction our wedding? Undeniably, she questioned, surprised. Lord Brandon shook his head. Us Starks, we are bound to our gods, so that to ask intercession from any other would bring calamity to our people, he told her. It is a hard law, but it is the law we have. He didn't seem to want to share more, and Vielle almost felt disappointed. Thought she was a diplomat at heart, and readily gained back her footing. And if my gods were not to be named, she asked. What do you mean, Your Highness? He asked, cocking his head to the side, his grey marrow-speckled eyes shining brightly. We could still do the ribbon ceremony, she offered, after the northern way. We could bind our hands and recite the oath, without naming the gods, recite it to the old gods in all faith and truth. Lord Brandon looked mildly surprised and fond before he said, I will consider it, he told her. I hope I can give you what you ask for. Vielle smiled. Thank you, my lord. She said, readying herself to trek back inside with or without him. She turned her skirt, rustling the leaves on the ground, when a noise compelled her to look up, and she visibly paled. The wolf was as big as a bear, as tall as a giant, and his fur was midnight black. A terrible-looking scar marred his snout, and his eyes were a deep steel grey eyes, and he had claws as long as her upper arm, though it did not bear them at her. She knew for experience with dogs in the kennels of Dragonstone that if she showed the beast that she was afraid, it would pounce on her, so she resolved to keep her breath slow despite being clearly afraid of it. The wolf bent his head down to be of the same height as hers and advanced on her as slow as possible, looking almost pleading, and when he was close enough he nudged gently her shoulder with his wet snout. Vielle let out a breath she did not know she had been holding, and tentatively offered her hand, burrowing it in the midnight black fur and petting the beast, who sat on his rear paw and let her touch and caress him as much as she pleased, which brought a smile on her full lips, before the beast gave her a nudge with its head and she squealed as a babe with the first toy. She turned, her eyes full of wonder, to her betrothed, to find him watching her in awe, astounded and amazed by the scene before him. Is it a direwolf? She asked, but when the wolf noticed her attention wasn't on it, it nudged her shoulder again, and Vielle laughed out, keeping caressing its head. Lord Brandon came closer. His name is Charlotte, he told her, and he is a direwolf of the north, a dear friend of mine. He explained. He is your direwolf? She asked, thinking back on how the Black Dread had been Aegon's dragon. Lord Brandon shook his head. He is not any more mine than I am his, he explained, joining her in caressing the beast, his hand lightly touching hers as they carded their fingers in the soft fur. We are one, in a way. He and I, but he is of the north. Vielle nodded. I think I have seen him before. She told him, during our travels north, to Winterfell, just on the border of the Wolf's Wood. I thought it a dream or a vision. It seems he was real. She said, immersing her face in the soft fur. He is quite the cuddler, she noticed when the direwolf let her do so, for a beast so frightening and dangerous. But Lord Brandon was looking at her as if the greatest question of the world had just been answered right before his eyes. He smiled at her and keep petting the direwolf. I think, Your Highness, that we could find a way to englobe your faith into our wedding. He offered, sounding more certain that he had but a moment before. Vial gave him a blinding smile and nodded. Thank you, my lord. Notes. As always, let me know what you think about it because I am curious. Winking smiley. If any of you has noticed, I have changed my icon. I am afraid it is not for some animalistic purpose, like do not kill lamb at Easter or turkeys on Thanksgiving, but a different personal reason. To keep it brief, I was insulted under another one of my fic and I was told I had the intelligence span of a turkey, hence the new icon. I quite like it, don't you? I find it quite adorable. Let me know what you thought of the story and hope to hear from you soon. Sending all my love. G. Chapter 3, Brandon 2, Part I. Summary. The wedding ceremony. Notes. I know I had promised both the wedding and the first night, but the chapter was too long and I have not had the time to reread it as I would have liked, but still wanted to get something out for Christmas. So here you have the wedding. Hope you like it and will be curious enough to read next chapters too. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Brandon 2. He sighed, looking up to the rustling red leaves of the weirwood tree. He had been up since the small hours of the morning getting prepared for his wedding. He had imagined, as a boy, it would be with some northern girl of noble standing who'd carry his children and look possibly as wild as the North was. Now, instead, he was about to be married to a Targaryen princess. A woman in truth with clear purple eyes the color of the pale, bright amethyst, pale ivory complexion on a moon-shaped face with rosebud's lips and a kind smile, long hair kissed by moonlight that would cascade down her back in soft waves and shine as if made of liquid silver. If even one doubt had remained after his mother had assured him she would be the right wife for him, it was completely gone by the time they had to be married. During their talks and walks, Brandon had started to appreciate the princess. She wasn't just a pretty face, and what a pretty face, she was gentle and wise and most kind, always kind, almost unnervingly so. She spoke calmly and her tone was so full of pathos that one could do nothing but empathize with what she was saying. Brandon had admired her steadfast belief and courage to actually come forward in the place of his gods and ask for her gods to be respected too. The gods had been touched by her soul too, for they had made their boon to her clear when Charlotte had advanced to her to be petted by her. Brandon still couldn't seem to wrap his head around the fact that the direwolf, bigger than a horse and just a bit shorter than a great bear, had advanced to his betrothed, his tiny, small betrothed, and had let her first pet him as if he was a domestic dog and then embrace him too as if he was but a small pet one may take as a companion and not a man-eating beast that could have eaten his betrothed in one swallow. She had looked so white in contrast with the black of the fur of the direwolf that Brandon had almost immediately gone to his mother asking for her a very special marrying cloak. His mother had smiled knowingly and showed him the item already done. Apparently she had already seen it and was just waiting for Brandon to come and collect it. He watched it, carefully folded, resting on the stone altar with the obsidian dagger and the silk white ribbon they would use to bind each other. "Nervous, my lord?" Roddick asked, smiling at him with his blue eyes merry for excitement. "You are about to tie the knot, no more escapades for you, I am afraid." Brandon could feel his own hands sweat for anticipation. He felt as if he was at a precipice about to be pushed down, the darkness threatening to swallow him whole, but on the other side he could see the light. "Well," his friend nodded, "at least she is beautiful. If Ned was here he would suggest you compose love songs for her." The mention of his absent brother made Brandon grimace. Ned had sent along his apologies, but he could not leave the Vale yet. He had sent his congratulation and his gift by horse, but Brandon would have still liked to have his brother near. "She will be here in a moment," his other brother, Benjen, intervened with that unnerving shorty of his, "and any doubt you have will be shredded." Brandon blinked. "I have no more doubts," he told him. "She will be a fine wife and a good lady." Benjen nodded. "I was not talking of that," he said. "You know what I was referring to." Brandon did not, but Benjen did not look to be about to articulate further. Furthermore, that crowd parted and finally she appeared, escorted by her brother down the candle-lighted path in the godswood. Brandon found he would have wanted nothing more than look at the reassuring smile of his mother from where she stood by the left side with Lionel. He knew she would nod her head and disperse any nervous question of his. But he found he could not bear to look away from his betrothed. She was breathtaking. She had wore her hair down, in waves of silver moonlight shining in the dim light casted by the candles. Only 2 small braids dangled on the front of her rich burgundy dress, beaded with silver beads that shined as small stars in her hair. The frontal tresses of hair had been pinned back by a circlet of pearls, and riotous curls framed her moon-shaped milky face. Her rosebud's lips were pinker than usual, especially the lower one. Had she bitten into it to calm her nerves, he wondered as he ached to taste those lips, and did her amethyst eyes shine brighter? Most probably. Her dainty hand was rested above the back of her brother's, white gloves against black. Why did she wear gloves? Her brother escorted her proudly, although certainly King Aes had meant it as a slight for the princess to be given to House Stark by his bastard and not his true-born son. What he did not know was that in the north bastardy was not a condemnation. True, most houses still despised the birth of bastards, but houses like the Starks, the Mormonts and the Umbers, who had at a certain point survived and thrived thanks to their bastard children, did not see any slight in it. Even if Maester Wallace had commented on it with a grimace, Brandon could not find it in himself to care. Not when she looked like moonlight cloaked in darkness come alive before him. As soon as they were near enough, she sent him an hopeful smile, and Brandon smiled in return before she turned to her brother with a bright smile full of affection. His father took a step, the kind swirling cold wind gently sweeping around them. "Who comes before the old gods, this night?" he asked, his smile broad when Sir Blackfyr repeated the words that had been imparted to him for the ceremony. "Avalia of House Targaryen, Princess of the Seven Kingdoms." Sir Blackfyr stated proudly. "She comes to be wed," he added, "a woman grown, true-born and noble. She comes to beg the blessing of the gods." He took a breath and looked at his sister dead in the eyes before they fixed directly in his. "Who claims her?" Brandon took a step forward, the gentle night breeze sweeping as if caressing his hair with motherly affection. "Brandon of House Stark, heir to Winterfell," he stated, looking at her eyes, pools of identical amethyst light. "Who gives her?" "Selhino of House Blackfyr," he replied, "her father's son." His lord father stepped up again. "Princess of Ilyar, do you take this man?" he asked. But the princess looked directly at him, smiling. "I take this man," she said, smiling softly. She then turned to her brother as he was to let her go and took of her gloves, slowly folding them properly and offering them to him. "I am going to be a Stark," now she offered as only explanation, and Brandon felt his heart soar as she stated that by the old gods they were already married, and that she would recognize that made his heart beat faster as she smiled at him while they came closer. Only then did they finally touch hands, and his father bind their hands together with the silken white ribbon. They looked each other in the eyes, amethyst against molten maroon and stark grey, and softly they recited their vows. "I am his and he is mine. I am hers and she is mine. From this day until my last day." Their hands gripped each other tightly as they said so, and only a moment after did Avalia, his wife, turn around and took her hair and let it dangle to her left side, exposing the pale expense of her porcelain neck. Brandon took the cloak from the altar and unfolded it in a sweeping motion as if it were real snow, and wrapped it around her shoulders. The silver direwolf shone on the snow-white fabric in the light of the candles. He then took the dagger and turned it around in his hand, offering it hilt first to her. She took it gingerly, and he still held the blade. "From this day," he told her in the old tongue, "until my last day, may this dagger give you my protection when my body is away." He had taught her the words to say back, and even if she for now knew only those, she spoke them as if she was fluent in old tongue, and he had no doubt she would be soon. "And from this day," she replied, "until my last day, may this amulet give you the protection of my soul when your body is away," she recited, offering him a pendant to wear around the neck in the form of a medallion. On both the blade of the dagger and the flat of the medallion was the symbol of everlasting love and faith. 2 triskells joined together with 3 cornered knots, because they were one body, one mind and one soul. And with that they were married. Under the eyes of his gods and of hers. Before all the north. When she had finished getting the cord around his neck, he strapped the dagger at her waist and smiled at her before cupping her face in his hands. He thumbed at her cheeks softly before diving in and capturing her rosebud's lips in a kiss. Her lips were heated against his, warm and inviting. Would she be so also? And her taste was something that went beyond any comprehension. It was sweet and salty at the same time, and they reminded him of the fresh first snow of the season. That was how he felt. Full of wonder as the first time ever he saw the fresh, white snow above the roofs and torreons of Winterfell. Her small, dainty hands wrapped around his wrist, one, and the other around his arm as she kissed him back with such a sweetness that the rest of the world, he was sure, would start to sour. The clapping of the present brought them back to reality. They stepped away from one another still in the arms of the other, and looked at the people. The few northern lords admitted and her household all with bright smiles on their lips. Even Lyanna was smiling a bit with her cheeks red. Brandon looked at his wife, his Lady Stark, and she looked back at him, her lord husband, and they shared a small smile. In that moment a single snowflake whirled in the air before falling on her pink lips. Then another, and yet another one. A small shower of snow fell, sweetly above their hair, and those who were present would after say of how that snow was magical, a blessing from the old gods themselves to the happy couple, crowning their heads and melting in their hair, the same blinding white of the bride's cloak, a shade lighter than her moon-bathed hair. Brandon took her hand in his, intertwining their fingers as the snow gently fell on them, and a moment later, Charlotte, the immense direwolf with the scarred snout and the midnight black fur padded in the freshly fallen snow on the leaves-covered ground, coming behind the new couple as great and mastodontic as ever, big enough to fit around them and seemed to actually protect them. Many were surprised when his wife burrowed her free hand and later hid her face in the beast-black fur for comfort and warmth both, and the direwolf led her. From there they led the procession back inside where a lavish feast was awaiting. He helped his wife walk with the impressing and bulky white cloak, and together they entered the great hall to be welcomed by cheer and whistles and happy calls. Brandon smiled and led her to the high table. "Come, my lady," he said, leading her up. "Let's celebrate our wedding." "As you wish, husband." Notes. As always, let me know what you think about it, for I am curious. Laughing smiley. Come you, don't be shy and let me know. Winking smiley. Hope to hear from you soon and hope you have a wonderful Christmas with your families and loved ones. All the love. G. Chapter 4, Brandon 2, Part 2. Summary. As promised, here is Brandon 2, Part 2, in which we will see the wedding feast, and their first dance together, learn some of Stark's lore about their origins, and Brandon and Vielle will consummate their marriage. It is lightly smut, so if you are not comfortable with it I suggest you stop by the partition line I will put in the chapter so that you know that from then on they will consummate and you don't have to read it. Notes. Hello. Hope you passed a good Christmas and Boxing Day. I certainly did, even if I had to return to work the next day. Thought I am on vacation until next Saturday, so good for me. Winking smiley. As I have stated in the chapter summary, there will be a bit of smut, very light because I am not really good with writing smut, for their consummation of the marriage, but I will put a partition line so that you know when to stop if you don't want to read even light smut. Hope you like this chapter and await your opinions on it. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Brandon 2, Part 2. So, my lord, be sincere. How was my pronunciation? His wife asked of him during their meal. Did I misspell any word? Brandon smiled. He had found that his wife was quite the perfectionist, and when faced with the prospect of learning the sentences she had to pronounce in the old tongue, she had wanted the perfect teacher, and when she had understood that Maester Wallace was not such a teacher, she had come to him asking him to teach her the right way with every word. A bit too nasal, he offered, but very good for a non-native speaker, my lady. Calling her his lady reminded him that she actually was that. She was his Lady Stark. She smiled softly. Just you wait, my lord, she said, I will be fluent in no time at all. She promised him. He made a face and she arched her pale brows. You don't believe me, she said, but it was not said in a tone that spoke of heavy silences and lies. No, it was a playful silence, because her lilac eyes danced with mirth. I will make you see, she promised, and you will have to concede I was right. Brandon smiled, took her hand in his from where it was resting on the table between them and kissed the back of it. I cannot wait for it, he promised. She blushed all prettily to the roots of her silvery blonde hair. He watches with rapt fascination as she eats and converses with him, though he is of little talk and rather watch her as she makes talk. His mother stands up suddenly, her goblet in hand. To my son, Brandon Stark of Winterfell, and his lovely wife, the Lady of Elia Stark. She called, and the lords and ladies assembled echoed her well wish. His wife smiled and Brandon did too. The snow fell on them as a mantle. One lord called from his seat, standing up with his goblet high in the air, "Long live the wild wolf and his dragon." "Here, here. And have you seen the way the direwolf took to her?" Another asked. "A blessing by the old gods, I tell you." He looked to his wife and found her smiling, although she did look a bit surprised by those wishes. He followed her line of sight, finding the reason for her smile to diminish. Her lady-in-waiting, Lady Shara Hightower, looked positively murderous. He asked himself why she would look so. He didn't trust the woman, had seen her being too belittling of his wife so far, yet that didn't mean he wasn't sorry for his wife to have such a negative companion around. He promised himself to find his wife a good deal of northern companions who would accept her for who she was. "I believe," his mother said, retaking the word, "that it is highly time for the first dance of the new couple." He smiled to his mother, brought the goblet in his hand to his lips and then set it aside as he stood up and offered her his hand. His wife took it without even hesitating, but she whispered to him as they were dusting the high table that she didn't know many northern dances. "Do not worry, my lady," he told her. "Northern dances are different than southerns." He assured her, "All you need to do is follow my guide." He added, "Think you can manage that, my lady? For only a dance, you say?" she asked with a mirth-laced glance. He smiled to her, dipping his head down to press a kiss to her lips. She didn't kiss him back, and the kiss was indeed too short for her to burrow in it, but she did smile to him after he distanced himself from her, guiding her to the center of the hall of banquets already freed from the tables that the lords and ladies had amassed by the walls to create place to dance, and he brought her closer to him, one of his hand to her lower back and the other grasped to her hand. "I would hope you would follow my lead in more than just a dance, lady wife," he told her, smirking when she blushed. "Why don't we start with the dance and we see where this leads us?" he offered. She smiled. "Very well, Lord Husband," she said, "I await your lead." When the song began it was heavy and the minstrel's voice was full of sorrow as he sung in the old tongue. "Once, too many moons passed, the children roamed the earth. And winter came and went. And the men came around. And the men came around. Where is Snowdrop, sir?" the children asked. "Where has the darkened path led her? Where is the son of the god with the double face, the god to which the door is closed in peace and open when war is in place? Where have they gone, sir? Where have they gone?" They started to move when Brandon turned her rather abruptly to the side, making her twirl on herself. True to herself, she did not lose her footing and followed his lead quite easily, as if she could read the next step in his eyes. "The wind saw them dance, sir. The wind saw them dance, sir." She shivered as Brandon held her close to him, so tiny and little against his much bigger frame, her small but womanly body pressed against his as they swayed to the music. "And the children said war, sir," they said. "And the men said war it will be, sir, the end they said." Brandon turned around and wrapped his hands around her slim waist, lifting her from the ground as he twirled on himself, her burgundy gown sweeping around her in stark contrast with her silver blonde hair. "The wind saw them dance, sir. The wind saw them dance, sir." "Where is Snowdrop, sir?" the children asked. "Where has the darkened path led her? Where is the son of the god with the double face, the god to which the door is closed in peace and open when war is in place? Where have they gone, sir? Where have they gone?" The minstrel kept singing as Brandon set her on her feet again. His wife smiled up to him and Brandon bent down once again, capturing her mouth with his for another kiss, but this time his wife was ready and stood on her tiptoes to kiss him back. "The wind saw them dance, sir. The wind saw them dance, sir." They started to sway again with the flute and chords, and the minstrel kept singing. "And war came and war went. And war came and war went." "Where is Snowdrop, sir?" the children asked. "Where has the darkened path led her? Where is the son of the god with the double face, the god to which the door is closed in peace and open when war is in place? Where have they gone, sir? Where have they gone?" His wife followed his lead flawlessly as Brandon raised their joined hands above her head, and she took the same steps he did, matching his with an easiness that should come from years of dancing together. "The wind saw them dance, sir. The winds herald their come, sir. The door closed will be, and the children in the wolf's wood will settle, sir. For Snowdrop another drop has given the son of the double-faced god, sir." Brandon twirled her around another time. "For Snowdrop another drop has given to the son of the double-faced god, sir. Another drop she has given, sir. Another drop she has given, sir." The song ended and the lords and ladies clapped as he and his wife bowed to them with a small smile. Brandon turned to his wife and she smiled up at him, and he was so enchanted by her that he did not take notice that after the dance another tradition was to be followed. It is time for the bedding ceremony, I say. A lord called as the others echoed his call, and Brandon saw as his wife's face paled immensely. Do not worry, my bummer man, he told her, no men shall touch you until you say so. He promised. I trust you, she said, and it pleased him to no end when she also came closer to him as the lords and ladies started to come closer. As it was though someone had already almost reached for her, and Brandon reacted on impulse. He wrapped his hand around the man's shoulder and lifted him as if he was but a feather and not a man twice his weight, for he was just as large as he was tall. His wife sobbed in surprise at this, and he walked with the man held high, his feet just above the paved floor, before setting him seated on a bench. He turned around, leaving the astounded man daily to sit there looking as if he had just witnessed something impossible, which to be fair he probably had by his own standard, and addressed the crowd as he walked back to his wife. Now, my lords, he said, if you do not mind, no one shall touch my wife but I. I am a wolf and I do not like to share. You keep celebrating, I and my wife will be in our chamber to celebrate in our own manner. I bid you all good night, he added for extra measure before bending down and whisking his wife up to his chest, one arm under her legs and the other circling her waist. She was really as light as a feather, and she giggled as he whisked her up, circling his neck with her arms as she pressed herself against him in such a delicious way he could not wait for when they would be alone. Without saying anything more, Brandon turned tail and left the banquet hall as the celebration resumed, also thanks to his mother who had swept in and had suggested they all begun to dance again. He walked with her in his arms up to his chamber, but not even outside of it did he put her back to her feet. Can you get the handle of the door, my lady? He asked as he adjusted his grip on her body. His wife struggled a bit but managed to turn the handle the right direction, and with an easy kick from his booted foot they managed to open the door just enough for them to walk through. Once they had done so, Brandon closed the door again with another kick. He walked a bit inside and then put his wife on her feet. Once he was sure she had her balance back, he turned around and closed the door so that no one could walk in on them. When he returned inside the antechamber, he realized his wife was waiting for him, as this was his space up until now and she didn't want to disrupt it by exploring on her own. He took her small hand in his and led her inside the real chamber. Come inside, my lady, he offered. She followed him inside and he watched as she took in everything of the room, from the steaming bathtub he had ordered to be prepared and placed by the hearth for them, to the door that led to his personal solar and the great bed with feather mattress. There were many wolf figures all around the place and his wife seemed to take it all in. I know it is a bit Spartan, my lady, he offered, but you may choose how to decorate it at your leisure. After all, I won't be the only one living here. She gave him a beautiful smile. It's lovely, she said, for an unmarried man chamber, she amended, but I think, my lord, I will very much like to stay here. These aren't the warmest chambers of the keep, he told her, but if you'd like we could easily transfer our apartments in those that were given to you. Those are the warmest of the keep. His wife studied her surroundings, then she walked to the wall and pressed her hand to it. Brandon knew it would be warm, maybe not as her own chamber, but warm enough not to let the winter cold seep inside the room. She smiled. These ones will be perfect, my lord, she offered, walking away from the wall and turning to face him with a small smile on her full lips. The song we danced to sounded very sad in the beginning. What story did it tell? Brandon understood she must have gotten the gists of it by her own study of the old tongue to learn the sentences by which binding herself to him, but had not understood very well the story narrated. Furthermore, she was trying to get comfortable by speaking. He offered her his hand. We speak better, he told her, if we are touching, I have found. She gave him a smile and took his hand, letting him guide her to a chair as he sat and she stood by him. The story is the story of the origin of us Starks. He says we can trace our ancestors up until Brandon the Builder, he said, and even before that, even if just in legend. It is told in fact that Brandon the Builder was born of the first Stark ever, a first man born of the love of a woman and a god, and his wife a child of the forest. A god? She asked, a child of the forest? Aren't those only stories for children? I will tell them you said so, he chuckled. I suspect they won't be impressed by it. She blushed all prettily and Brandon continued. The story speaks of when first men and children of the forest were at war with one another, and it recounts of the children of the forest starting the war because one of theirs, Snowdrop, had been lost, presumably kidnapped by a man. He explained, of how the wind saw them dance together because they were actually in love with each other. First men and children of the forest warred because of this perceived slight until the couple returned with their baby, Bran the Builder, in tow. Then the war was ended and the children settled outside Winterfell to protect the boy who had built it, and that was their kin. So it was a love story, she commented. Brandon nodded, turning her small hand in his and kissing the back of it. It was. Every Lord Stark has to dance it with his lady at his wedding day. She nodded. Thank you for explaining it to me, my lord. I think you should call me Brandon, or Bran, don't you? After all, we are married now. He suggested, and she smiled at him with her amethyst eyes shining. Only if you call me by my name too, Brandon. He shivered hearing her use his first name, the way it rolled on her tongue as if she was claiming him by just saying his name. As you wish, Avalia. He replied in kind. His wife's pretty face blossomed red and she smiled. Most people call me Vile, she told him, they find it less difficult to pronounce. Did I misspell it? No, you didn't, she offered, shaking her head. I only know it is not the usual Targaryen name and many have difficulties spelling it. He nodded. It is not the typical Targaryen name, he conceded. Why did your parents choose it? He asked, curious as he led his wife to sit on his tight. She let herself be guided and adjusted herself as she mulled on her reply. It is a High Valyrian name, she explained, and it means to breathe. I had struggled breathing when I first was born, she told him, so I suppose it was a well-wish by my mother and father. The Maesters were afraid I would not survive my first night in this world. Instead you are here. She nodded. Yes, I am. She said, suppose I have proved them all wrong time and time again when they were ready to have me dead for this disease or this other, she offered. I suppose I am too stubborn to just roll over and die. Brandon chuckled. You will fit right in with us with that attitude, he promised. Us Stark, we are known for being quite stubborn ourselves. Avalia smiled to him, and it was one of the most beautiful sights he had ever seen. But, she asked, why the bath tube? Oh, well, he said, I know that after a good feast I am quite sweaty and I would have liked nothing more than a good bath to set the mood for the evening, he said, before adding, deciding to be sincere, I know you women have to be the most relaxed to face the first night, especially since you are virgins. Avalia seemed to be astounded for a moment, then she smiled. It was thoughtful of you, my lord, she said. I suppose my nerves were unjustified now that I see how thoughtful and caring you can be. She offered before diving in and initiating it for the first time, his lips with hers. Her lips were soft and warm, and they did remind him of the first snow he had ever seen, even if they tasted of the sweetened wine she had consumed that night and of the honeyed meat he had made sure they would have at their marriage feast. He wrapped his arms around her waist and brought her flushing against him, bringing a hand to burrow in her silvery locks. She sighed against his mouth and he took it as an invitation, carefully tracing the corner of her lips with his tongue and waiting for her to grant him access inside of her mouth. Which she did almost immediately. She was quite clearly not much experienced, but Brandon could not fault her when she seemed to match his fervor with steady and sweet brushes of her tongue against his. She did not battle for dominance, she merely grounded him, and in the end he was the one granting her dominance as she explored his mouth eagerly, pressing herself even more fleshly against him, making his manhood harder by the minute as she mewed softly against his mouth just before they separated to breathe. She was quite red in the face, and it was clearly due to her own embarrassment as she sighed. My apologies, she said, I got carried away. Brandon wrapped his arm around her waist more snugly and pressed a hand to her chin, compelling her to look up. Why are you apologizing? He asked. There is nothing wrong in getting carried away on our wedding night. Avalia smiled sheepishly. I know you lords have needs, Brandon, she said, and I hope I can live up to those needs. Thought I also know that it is a woman's duty, and as I should not get carried away and just do my duty. Brandon blinked, unsure. Was this how the Southerns prepared their daughters to their first night? It wouldn't surprise him if they did so, that said daughters would forever remain convinced they should not feel any pleasure from the marriage bed. I do not want to pressure you if you feel like this is only your duty, my lady, he told her. I wouldn't share my bed only for duty with you. She blinked, clearly surprised. And what do you expect of me, my lord? I would expect for you to get as much pleasure as I will from our marriage bed, my lady, he told her, playing with a silvery curl of her mane. I will not force you for a duty you don't feel compelled to follow because of your own volition. Avalia frowned. We are married whether we consummate our marriage or not, my lady, he told her. Our blood is one now, our body and soul are one now. We do not need to consummate either today or never if you don't feel up to it. She scrunched her nose just so, and it made him want to kiss her again, but he refrained, trying to get a hold of his own want. This would be about his wife. If she was uncomfortable with sharing her bed with him, he would not share it, not until she asked him to. "If you are to be my wife in truth, Avilia," he said, "I want you to be so in truth. I want you to get as much as I do from our union. Whether it be physical or emotional. The choice is yours." She looked down her small hands and sighed before straightening herself in his embrace. She cupped his face with her small, warm hands and kissed his lips. This kiss was chaste and quick, but it held every significance as she then disentangled herself from him and turned, giving him her back and sporting her hair to the right as to expose the laces on her back. "Would you mind helping me, Brandon?" she asked. "I find I don't quite have the patience for this laces tonight." He shot up as if the chair he was seated on was on fire and strode to her. He caressed the white expanse of her neck and pressed a kiss there before asking, "Are you sure?" "I will stop if you ask me to," he promised. She smiled. "And what if I ask you to not stop?" she mused, her amethyst eyes glinting in the candle-lit room. Brandon gave her a wolfish grin and captured her lips with his as he made haste of unlacing her corset as swiftly as possible. The red fabric of her gown pooled at her feet and she stepped on it as she took off her boots and pressed her wool-wrapped feet to the stone floor of the chamber. She turned to face him. Her beautiful, lithe and tiny body was carded in her ivory nightgown with a generous neckline which was held together by a lace knotted just against the junction between her collarbones. The fabric of the nightgown clung to her body and wrapped around her slim waist before cascading down her legs. She bent down and lifted up a leg, exposing the pale, milky expanse of skin as she gathered her high wool stockings that were tied snugly at her thigh and dragged them down to her ankles and feet before discarding them, exposing her pale bare feet to the stone floor. "You are overdressed, my lord, for our bath," she told him, and Brandon made haste to rid himself of his pants and doublet, remaining only with his under-tunic which went down hanging just below his crotch. She smiled up to him and Brandon saw how her hands shook with barely contained nerves as she tried to unlace her nightgown. He covered her shaking hands with his and brought them to his lips. "We have to do nothing if you don't feel up to it, Bunnerman." "You called me that once already," she pointed out. "What does it mean?" "It means Dragon of the Moon," he told her truthfully, "because your hair is kissed by the moonlight and your face reminds me of the shining moon." She smiled beautifully. "I hadn't know you were a secret romantic poet at heart, Brandon." He smiled, kissing her on the nose. "Oh, I am not, trust me, Avilia," he told her, "but my younger brother, Ned, is, and he would have suggested I write poetry for you." She giggled. "Well," she said, "I would very much like to hear such a poetry if you ever got around to actually compose it," she jested. "Only if I can hear you sing," he told her. "You will not let that go, will you?" He shook his head. "I am quite stubborn," he told her, "and I will hear you sing." "Then," she said, "I shall hear your poetry." Brandon smiled and rolled his eyes. She smiled too, and he noted that her shaking had abated. She then unlaced her nightgown and let her pool to her feet when it dragged down her waist, and Brandon finally could see her body in the candle light. He had been right. Her body was a sight to behold. Small and lithe, with an almost flat belly, small but perky breasts and toned legs and a very slim waist, she was exactly as he had imagined her in his daydreams and more. Her long silvery hair hung to a side and half hid her torso from him, and though she seemed nervous she did not look to be shaken as before. "You are quite beautiful, Bunnerman," he offered in a breath. "You do take my breath away." She smiled and tucked a strand of silvery blonde hair behind her small, perfect ear. "I should hope not, Nu Hazokla Valeries," she told him with a small, satisfied smile. Brandon went to catch her around the waist, but she turned, giving him the sigh of her most perfectly round underside, as she entered the bathtub without even looking back at him. He felt his manhood hardening even more as he watched her, half hidden by the water of the tube, especially when she motioned for him to come closer. He knelt by the side of the tube and, uncaring of the sleeve of his tunic getting wet, he dipped his hand in the water, curling it around her waist and bringing her forth to steal another kiss from her. As they kissed leisurely, Brandon started exploring her body with his hands, cupping her small breasts in one hand and stroking down the side of her abdomen. She was ticklish too, he found, to her thighs, and trailing his fingers around her inner thighs. He watched her as she closed her eyes and just enjoyed his ministration until he stroked, experimentally, her core. Her amethyst eyes snapped open and she looked at him almost in panic. He kissed her to quiet her protests before telling her, "Just let yourself feel it, Bunnerman," he pleaded of her, "let me take good care of you." though he did not move until she gave him her say-so by nodding. He explored her core without any haste, carefully caressing it before dipping a finger inside of her, helped also by the moisture both of her and provided by the water. She tensed at the intrusion but did not ask him to stop, so he carefully moved, trying to not give in to his own desire by just kissing her instead of devouring her as he would have wished. She reciprocated his kiss up until when he started pumping his finger inside and out of her, moment during which she actually mewled, making him shiver in his own pursuit to try and control his own desire. Sure. He nudged her temple with his nose. Just let yourself feel it, he suggested, knowing she was most probably starting to feel the build-up and she would soon experience her own pleasure firsthand. But she was panting, and by the way her hand was gripping the tube it was clear she was about to panic. Brandon cupped her face with his free hand and nudged her to look at him. Her clear amethyst eyes were glazed over and clearly afraid. He kissed her nose. Look at me, he pleaded of her. Just at me, he told her. I won't ever hurt you, he promised. She nodded and he felt her starting to relax again. And then she started to try and close her legs as he started stroking her pearl of pleasure, because she probably didn't know what was happening, but she looked at him the eyes and smiled and left herself feel relaxed against him. He realized the moment her pleasure hit her because she arched her back and let out a mewl she had yet to voice before sagging against the side of the tube. Brandon pushed her silvery blonde hair from her forehead and kissed her there as she looked up at him with heavy-lidded amethyst eyes. What was that? He kissed her brow lovingly. That, my bunner man, he told her, is what happens when the man is a good lover. He boasted, you women can be difficult to pleasure, but with the right partner you can draw as much pleasure as we men do from the marriage bed, he assured her. The water is starting to cool, she murmured, and Brandon smiled. Without any difficulty he wrapped his arms around her slim waist and lifted her from the tube, setting then her to her feet, before wrapping her in a ivory cloth. She let herself be wrapped in it, and on wobbly legs she advanced to the bed on which laid her discarded nightgown. With heavy movements she redressed with it just as Brandon took off his own tunic. She turned around, her nightgown hanging from one of her shoulder, leaving bare a generous expanse of her skin, a rose pink nipple almost visible through the fabric. She held out her hand and Brandon took it in his, letting her lead him to the bed. She scooted on the feather mattress so that she was resting against the headboard, and she just looked at him for some moments before her sight set on his manhood. She bit her lip unconsciously and Brandon smiled at her. We can stop here, he assured her, if this is how far you want to go tonight. She shook her head. No, she said with such a resolve that made him shiver. I wish to be your wife in truth, she told him. I know it will be discomfortable in the beginning, she offered, but I trust you to take care of me. Always, he promised, leaning up to capture her lips in a kiss. She kissed him back with equal fervor, and Brandon just contented himself with kissing her even if his hard manhood was demanding attention. When they broke apart, Brandon left another kiss on her nose before nosing her neck. I would like to do something else before I take you and make you mine. In truth, he told her, it will also help you both relax and prepare you for the breaking of your maidenhead. Avilia nodded. Very well, she said, do as you wish, Brandon. He smiled against the pale skin of her neck and pressed a kiss there before slowly make his way south on her body. She arched against his ministration, but Brandon could feel her intense gaze on him. She was in equal part curious and scared of what was about to happen, and if the way she brought a hand to his shoulder blades was of any indication, she was also turned on. He wondered if down there she would be moonlight kissed as on her perfect brow, and in fact he did find soft moonlight silver curls still a bit damp from her bath. He breathed against the skin of her inner thigh and he felt her propping herself on her elbows to look down at him, so he looked up and her amethyst eyes found his. Without ever breaking eye contact, Brandon advanced to her core and watched as she cocked her head to the side, her slightly damp silver hair dangling to the side too as her chest heaved in anticipation, nerves and who knew what else. He was gentle with her, despite his more basic nature asking of him to take her as wildly as wolf would demand of his mate. He tasted her bittersweet taste on his tongue and felt her go rigid as pressed her hands to his shoulder. My lord. She gushed, that is highly improper. He looked up from his position and replied, nothing that happens tonight or the nights to come will be improper between us, bunner man, he told her. We are husband and wife and I refuse to leave my wife unpleased while she gives me my pleasure. He covered her hand with his, squeezing gently. Just let me try, he told her. If you find that you do not like it I will stop, he promised, though it had been quite the feat for him to stop now to quiet her doubts. He would do it too, for her, if she asked it of him. He returned to give his ministration to her and he felt her starting to relax even if she was still as tense as a violin. Little by little he felt any tension outside of her belly vanish as she let herself be tasted by him. If her kisses reminded him of the first snow he had seen as a young boy, her true taste reminded him of a cozy night as the snowstorm outside of his chamber with a lively fire in the hearth. He was reminded of home. He felt her begun to trash a bit when she was ready to experience her pleasure again, but while the first time she had been panicked, this time the panic was less because she knew what to expect, and though she still seemed to be a bit disconcerted by the sensation, she let herself relax, and when she did come, Brandon felt her sag completely against the bed. He then raised up on her body again, mindful of not crushing her small body with his, and caressed her face as she came down from the afterglow of her pleasure. When her amethyst's eyes were lucid again, she turned her face to him and smiled softly. "That is well and good, my lord," she murmured, "yet I am still my own, and not your wife in truth." Sometimes Brandon mused if she was as innocent as she seemed or if it was just a ploy. Then he remembered that one could be both, because she would try to play a bit coy, and master it too, but would blush to the roots of her hair because she was still a bit embarrassed by it all, and resolved she indeed was so innocent and yet so sensual by nature. He had indeed lucked out. The grin he sent her way was wolfish. "You shall always remain your own," he told her, "but you will also be mine." "As I will be yours," he told her. "Well then, my lord," she said, "make me yours." Brandon would not be able to tell how long after that they just played with each other, but he would be able to tell that when he finally took her maidenhead she was as ready as she could be, and though he stayed frozen as long as she needed, soon enough she had asked him to move inside of her. He had quite the stamina, as many of the Northmen did, and he had the time to leisurely introduce his wife to the pleasures of the marriage bed, learning every spot he could. He one single session, that made her mewl in pleasure or pant or moan out his name. She was melodic even in her pleasures, he noticed, for never his name left her perfect, rosebud mouth with a discordant sound. And when finally, both of them were spent, with him still inside of her, Brandon let his head fall against her bare shoulder, left bare by her nightgown, and pressed a kiss there to the lightly freckled skin. He was still hovering over her, his manhood still inside of her, and she meant to keep him there, for she embraced him, and though he was mindful not to crush her with the weight of his body, he let her have this small comfort even as their sheets were stained red. Together they laid like that, still united as one. Notes. So here we are, what have you thought of it? Let me know, for I am super curious about it. Winking smiley. Hope you pass the rest of the holidays well, sending all my love. G. Chapter 5, Vial 3. Summary. Vial and Brandon morning after their wedding, plus they go to meet some people and she is given some sort of prophecy. Notes. Hello. How are you all? I hope you are all fine. I hope you like this chapter. I know I take a while to update, but I do much research for this fic, and so I hope you like it. We will see more of children of the forest, giants, shamans, dwarfs and such in the north and in this fic, so I am trying to lay all the groundwork for it all. Let me know what you think of it, do not be shy. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Vial 3. She was woken up the next morning by Brandon pressing kisses all along her face and neck, pressing open-mouthed kisses to the skin of her shoulder, exposed by her nightgown. He was half sprawled on her, and she can feel quite clearly his manhood already hard against her tight, which made her shiver as she remembered the happening of her wedding night. Vial had been prepared for that night, as most ladies in the south were, by her own scepter. Suffice to say, it had been completely different than what she had anticipated all her young life. She had anticipated a cold, constipated night in which her maidenhead would be claimed by her husband, perhaps one of her brothers, but that dream had long since died. Perhaps some high lord, who would find his own pleasure she was duty-bound to give to him without asking for nothing for herself, and be done with it. Instead she had gotten a quite handsome and caring husband, which she had long stopped to hope of, who had made the whole night's point to make her feel comfortable in her new role as wife and lover, and that had shown himself for being, yes, full of lust, but also caring and sweet with her. Vial honestly had not known what to expect from him after what her brother had discovered on him. By all accounts it must be some miracle he has yet to father a bastard, but Brandon had not been it. He had been solely focused on her happiness and pleasure the other night, and when finally he had claimed her as his, he had been as sweet, as powerful and passionate. She had honestly felt as if she was the safest woman in the world now. "Brandon," she murmured, her voice croaking due to the sleep, Her husband raised his dark head off her chest, where he had started to nip at the skin left bare by her nightgown, teasing also a nipple from under the fabric, and his steel-grey eyes found her amethysts one. "Good morning, Bummerman," he greeted her, smiling softly with his full lips. "My lady wife." Vielle smiled back at him. "And good morning too, Nu Hazokla Valeries," she greeted him back, carding her long, ivory fingers in his dark hair. "Have you slept soundly?" He pressed his forehead against the crook of her neck. "I do not know what that means," and Vielle giggled. "But I slept as soundly as a babe," he offered. "It was many years past since I slept so well. In fact," he looked up once again and traced her face with one of his hands. "Mayhap it is you who make this magic work on me and help me rest," he said. "Maybe it's just your soothing presence that gives me peace." Vielle smiled softly and he dove in, kissing her fully on the lips, no matter her morning breath, nor her being still half asleep. He kissed her passionately and thoroughly, and soon they were back as naked as the night before. Actually, Vielle could not remember Brandon ever wearing his breeches again yesterday night when she had donned on her nightgown again to sleep. "Then come to me," she promised. "Every time you need, I will be there," she offered. She knew most marriages, especially match made from the families, were seldom happy. Some grew to respect each other and even love each other, but almost always they led separated lives and had almost nothing to do one with the other. She did not want that for herself and Brandon. His eyes shone and he dove in to kiss her again. "I will," he promised back, "only if you promise to come to me too." And Vielle could have said many a thing to that. "Yes, I will," she could have told him. Instead she cupped his face and kissed him softly on the lips. "I promise," she offered. They remained laid together, simply caressing each other, and though their passion after some time did lead to Brandon descending on her body, and bestowing his ministration on her again, though sweetly and carefully, for she was still sore from their love-making the previous night, in the end, when dawn had approached since a couple of hours already, they finally decided it was time to rise. Brandon rose before her, standing up, and also giving her, without no shame whatsoever, a full view of his toned and muscular back and backside, and donning his tunic and breeches, Vielle sat up and slowly, mindful of the soreness in her lower belly and inner tights, swung her legs out from under the sheets and the furs. She found Brandon before her a moment after, as he offered her a dressing gown to protect her from the chill outside the furs and without the heat his body close to her brought. "Thank you," she offered, donning it on. As she stood slowly on her wobbly legs, Brandon caught her, wounding an arm around her waist and hoisting her up in his arms. "I think you need a bit of refreshment, my lady," he offered as he deposited in one of the comfiest chairs she had ever sat upon. He then turned around and went to the antechamber of their apartments, and from there she heard him call for food to be brought to them. "We should go to the great hall," she said, "not stay cooped up, they will believe us rude." Brandon let out a full belly laugh, a laugh she was growing to love quite much as it was true and contagious. "Oh, my bunner man," he told her, caressing her long silver hair, "no one will expect us in the great hall for quite some time," he offered. "Us Stark men are known for our great love for our ladies," he added. "We seldom let them leave the bed the first days of marriage. We are as wolves after all." Vielle smiled softly. "Well, on this I will follow your lead, my lord," she said, "so we are not expected for quite some time." He said, "but I would still like to bring you somewhere if you feel up to it, today," he told her, kissing her brow lovingly. Vielle looked up at him and cocked her head to the side. "Where?" she asked. "Well, if I did tell you it would not be a surprise," he offered. "You are the next lady of Winterfell now," he told her. "One day you will be the wife of the Warden of the North, and that come with certain responsibilities." "I was taught how to manage a household, my lord," she told him, blinking. "I was taught how to manage a royal household. I think I am up for such tasks." "I am not saying you aren't," he told her with a small smug smile. "Hold the fire, Bunnerman," he added, offering her a cup of water. She drank from it, trying to hide in the rim of the cup her blushing cheeks. Brandon caressed her cheek with a thumb and smiled. "I was talking of other type of tasks," he told her. "Tasks that are competent only of the Lady of Winterfell." He told her, "You shan't have to take that mantle until you are ready, but you are also foreign, so you need to learn that things that they could not teach you as they do not know them." She nodded, looking down and feeling a bit childish for having immediately felt wounded in her pride when he suggested there were things she was not capable of doing, being used to be the disappointment of her family, not Targaryen enough, not driven enough, not enough strong, and seen like some kind of failure at being princess by the southern court. She had automatically thought the worst. "Avilia," he called her, and she looked up at him. "Look at me," she did, and in his eyes she could read no ill thought, no judgment, and it was refreshing. "You are not a burden here," he told her, as if he could actually read in her mind. "You are you, and you will accept it for what you are." What you will feel comfortable in doing will be enough, for us all. She felt so touched by his declaration that she stood up suddenly despite her still weak legs and advanced to him. She toed on her tiptoes and brought a hand behind his head, bringing it closer to hers as she kissed him on the lips. A knock on the door made them break away from each other, and Brandon still kept his arms around her waist as he called enter. A maid had brought them 2 plates full of fuming oatmeal and some dried fish. She blushed to the very roots of her hair, left the tray on the table and, never once looking at them, excused herself from their presence. Brandon laughed again as Vielle slapped his arm. "You are a brute," she jested. Poor girl, she was scandalized. "We were just kissing, Bunner man," he told her softly. "Beside, you are my wife. I may very well kiss you how much we both want, no matter what the servants may think." Vielle rolled her eyes, and he finally did let go of her as she sat back again and took 1 plate of oatmeal, letting it warm her hands as she breathed on it to cool it enough to eat it. Brandon sat before her on another chair and surveyed the oatmeal before taking up the dried and salted fish, eating it before the oatmeal in ravenous bites, as if he himself has worked up quite the appetite, before setting his sights on the oatmeal. They were in companionable silence, and for one of the first times in her life she didn't find the silence surrounding her pregnant or too heavy. She just enjoyed it. When they were done with their fast, Vielle looked up to Brandon. "So where would you like to bring me?" "I already told you," he told her with a smile, taking the plate from her hand and setting it once again on the tray of food. "If I told you, where would be the surprise?" "But if you do not tell me, how am I to know what to wear?" she asked, and he rolled his steel grey eyes heavenward. "Fine," he told her. "Wear comfy clothes," he added. "We will go riding and trekking for a bit," he said. "You are going to come with me in the Wolf's Wood." So, after having washed himself and dressed himself, he kissed her brow and left her to her own devices to get ready for their outing. Not much time after that came a knock outside of her chambers inside of which she was being helped to dress by a few maids Brandon had sent her, gentle enough but clearly a bit awkward to be talking to a princess they knew nothing about yet. "Yes," she called, and from outside replied the voice of her lady-in-waiting, Lady Shara Hightower. She stopped the maids for a moment. They were braiding her hair the northern way, and called, "Come inside, Shara." The woman did come inside. Her friend strode inside and stopped in her tracks seeing the 2 maids already inside. Vielle smiled. "Lady Shara," she greeted with a smile, "please allow me to introduce to you Jane and Dela." The 2 maids bowed to the high-born noblewoman and Vielle smiled. "Enchanted," Lady Shara said, in a tone that suggested anything but, and Vielle frowned. "Your Highness, what are you doing getting on your riding attire? You surely do not mean to go out riding in this weather," she exclaimed, and Vielle sighed. "Girls, may you please leave us?" she asked cordially. "I'd like a few moments with Lady Shara alone." The 2 maids simply bowed and excused themselves, calling her "my lady." When the door of the antechamber was closed behind them, Vielle turned to her oldest friend. "You were being very disrespectful, Shara," she told her. Shara opened her mouth ready for a rebuttal, but Vielle held up her hand. "I am not finished, my lady," she told her. "I am a lady of House Stark by marriage now, Shara. So the appropriate term to refer to me as is my lady from now forth," she reminded the woman. "And, I will most surely go riding with my husband today," she added. "It is not too cold, and I assure you that Brandon would let nothing befall me. We will go riding and exploring together to bond. Surely you could do anything else but expose you to such a cold weather," she exclaimed, alarmed. Vielle sighed. "Shara, I appreciate your care for my health," she said, "but I have not been ill since I arrived on Dragonstone many years past," she added. "I am no longer as prone as I once was to fall ill," she told her, "and I'd like to enjoy a bit of the North as long as I can. I am to be, one day, the wife of the Warden of the North. And what kind of lady do you want me to be? The one that does not know her own country, or one who does?" This seemed to hold her tongue for a moment. "Evermore you should refrain from reproaching me in front of my new people, for they are bound to end up believing I am frail and unhealthy if you keep your behavior up." Shara looked down, clearly properly chastised, and Vielle sighed. "I am sorry, my friend," she said, "but we had to talk about it at some point. You cannot keep to treat me as if I am child, when I am a woman grown and married now." Lady Shara said nothing to this, and Vielle sighed. "Would you like to help me with my hair?" she offered. "You usually make them all pretty all the time," she asked, and she shrugged, coming closer and loosening the braids and combing it yet again. "How would you like to sport them, my lady?" she asked. Thought the new title did sound foreign on her lips and did sound forced. Vielle looked herself in the reflecting glass for a moment and watched her shiny silver hair and turned to her friend. "I'd like it simple," she said, "perhaps even not braided back. What do you think?" Shara started almost immediately. She ultimately only pinned one side of her silver blonde hair behind her ear with a pearl clasp and let the rest of her hair to flow around her face. She combed them with oil so that they looked almost completely straight despite having been puffed out for the moisture of the air around them. "Thank you, Lady Shara," she said as someone opened the door of the antechamber without knocking. Her husband strode inside and came to kiss her on the forehead before addressing her lady-in-waiting. "Lady Shara," he greeted. "May I take my wife?" he asked, arching a brow, his tone clearly overstating the innuendo, and Vielle blushed as much as Shara, only she shared in his laugh as the lady excused herself and he let out another laugh. Despite being in such a somber place, Vielle had found that Brandon laughed very much and wasn't always as serious as he often looked, though she found that though his face shared the severe look of his siblings and parents, he was prone to laughter as much as to displays of power and force. "You are incorrigible," she mused as he offered her his hand. "And you look very northern in your riding attire, my lady wife," he offered back. "We'll make a proper northern out of you yet," he jested as he helped her get up from the chair and donning on the snow-white furred marriage cloak he had wrapped her in the previous day. "Let us go, my wife. Lead the way, husband." Brandon's stallion was enormous. He must be to carry a man such as him, and next to him Silverwave was being prepared for her as well. Brandon led her to the horses, then literally just hoisted her up her mare by the waist, adjusting her white snow cloak around her, to make sure she is warm and comfortable. He had attached a great axe to his back instead of the sword she had seen him carry around during this few weeks she had known him. He mounted on his stallion and together they rode out of the gates of Winterfell. Riding with Brandon was something else. He did not go to the trot, he rode with the fever of the damned, and she enjoyed the rush just as much as he did, though when they arrived close to the Wolf's Wood he stopped his stallion, which name is Winterstorm, and dismounted, helping her dismount off Silverwave too. Her cheeks must have been red for both the cold and the exertion, and he dove down to kiss her on the lips passionately. Vielle wrung her hand around his neck and he brought her flush against him, his hands wrapped around her slim waist below her white cloak. "From here on," he told her, "we must proceed on foot," he said. "I hope you enjoy walking, for it will be quite the long trek." Vielle nodded and he kissed her hand before starting to lead her inside the woods. They walked together as he shared tidbits of his childhood and she shared hers. Though she found his were quite more happy than hers, though she could never say her childhood had been sad. One time, he told her as they were walking, still hand in hand, and had been, at one point, joined by Charlotte, who walked leisurely behind them, his imposing mole having no difficulties in the dense trees barring his road. "My sister Lioness sneaked out after us because she wanted to come to the Wolf's Wood too. I get the impression she does it often," she smiled. "She does," he replied. "She would love nothing more than take up arms and fight like the Mormont's women do. She has no talent to be a healer or a green seer." "What is a green seer?" she asked, confused, and Brandon smiled, shaking his head. "Sometimes I forget how little you know of the North," he told her. "A green seer is someone who is touched by the gods," he explained. "They are wise men and women that can see things other people can only imagine. They can do things we can only dream of. Like a prophet or something?" she asked as he helped her with a large branch, hoisting her up by the waist and setting her back on her feet only once past said branch. He shrugged. "In a way," he replied. "They have the ability to walk," he explained, "to enter in the mind of animals and guide their movements. Some of them can be skin changers, and if they are green seers they can see beyond. They can see what happened, what could happen, and what is happening everywhere in the world, in this moment." Vielle opened her mouth in disbelief. "That sound enchanting," she exhaled, and Brandon shrugged. "Ask Benjen how enchanting it is to be woken up sweating in the middle of the night because you walked on a battlefield while you were sleeping," he told her, and Vielle stopped in her tracks. "Benjen is a greenseer?" she asked, and Brandon nodded. He told her. "We Stark have a powerful bond with the gods and the North," he told them. "Often in our family there are greenseer, usually there is one in each generation," he explained. "Benjen is ours. My mother was the greenseer of her generation. She taught him everything he knows. Thought she maintains he will be much more powerful than she ever was." Vielle blinked, surprised. "Your mother is one too? Why else do you think they took to you so easily?" he asked. "They had been bugging me about you for weeks, even before the betrothal was concluded. They loved you so much, and they had not even met you yet." When he saw she stopped in her tracks, he walked back to her and embraced her loosely, noticing her blush. "Why are you embarrassed, Bunner man?" he asked. "They bugged you, long before you even knew we would marry?" she asked again, just to make real sure, and he nodded. "Oh gods have mercy," she exhaled, embarrassed. Brandon chuckled. Though, to be fair, he added, you exceeded any expectation they may have set of you by telling me about my beautiful future wife, he added, nudging her nose with his, and Vial rolled her eyes. You are just being courteous. Not in the slightest, he told her. I never expected you to ride inside Winterfell that way. You made quite an impression on me, he added. I could not stop thinking about you for all day that first day we met. She blushed and he smiled. May we continue, my lady? You still have not told me where you mean to bring me. You shall see in about. Vial noticed him turning his back to the path they had been following, with dark leaves and smudge of snow on it, and he smiled at her, and Vial understood that something was about to happen. Then suddenly a figure, small and lithe and extremely green and grey, hurled from the trees and launched itself at Brandon with a mighty war cry. Brandon let himself being literally climbed by the small figure before grabbing its legs and starting running wildly as a dog to whom a cat had jumped upon, which was ridiculous and brought a gurgling laugh to her lips. The two stopped their mock war when they heard her laugh, and it was such a full, belly laugh like she had not laughed since she was a young girl that she had to lean on Charlotte for support, and the immense, scary-looking direwolf did nothing but let her lean on him as she laughed so hard there were tears in her eyes. Brandon let whoever it was that had attacked him down, and the small figure, that of a child she supposed, hid behind him, his grey-green big eyes peeking at her from behind Brandon's knees. She leaned forward and smiled. Hello there, who are you? She asked kindly, offering her hand. The small girl, for it was a girl indeed, took a step forward. She was indeed strange. Her eyes were bigger than any she had yet to see, and grey-green. Her skin seemed more resistant and softer altogether. It was nut brown and resembled that of a deer, for the damples of lighter color scattered across of it. This little girl hand, that she proffered to take hers, was only with 3 clawed finger and a thumb. She had long dark nut brown hair styled as dread and ringlets and intertwined with leaves, vines and flowers, and also some red berries. This one little warrior, Brandon told her, is Winterberry, and she is a child of the forest, he told her. Vial, having suspected this by her characteristics already, simply nodded to him and bended on her knees so that she was the same height of the girl who came closer, her hand still clasped in hers, looking at her with her cat-slitted like green eyes. She brought tentatively her small clawed hand to her face, and she remained perfectly still, letting her study her. Then she gently touched a strand of her hair. You are very pretty, she told her with a gentle and ringing voice. She smiled. Thank you, Winterberry, she replied. I think you are very pretty too. What are those flowers in your hair? They are violas, she said, sounding so very excited. They are the same hue of your eyes. You have hair of moonlight and eyes of violas. Very, very pretty, she added, looking at Brandon. Prettier than you, she told him, sticking out her tongue, and Brandon let out a chuckle and offered Vial his hand to help her stand. I know she is, he told her as he helped Vial back to her feet once again. Then he turned to Winterberry again and said, lead the way, Winterberry. I wanted a Vial to meet everyone. The girl started jumping up and down and took Vial's free hand, starting to lead them across the path in the forest. The children of the forest lived in a clearing in houses housed in tree trunks, above the branches and between the roots. There were at least 30 of them when Winterberry led them to their village, and they all resembled her in some way. A light white dust of snow had freshly fallen on their village, giving it an enchanting look. Every one of them approached them, and the children, there were 5 or 6 of them, all tackled Brandon, clearly used to play with him at length. And when finally Brandon did turn to them, after having kissed her cheek before excusing him, starting to run after them in jest, the women of the children of the forest circled her, all talking in a strange dialect that seemed to resemble the old tongue. I am sorry, she told them, I do not understand you. One of them, one who had snowdrops intertwined in her hair with acorns, took her hand. Sit with us, daughter of the dragon, she told her. Sit with us, bride of the wolf. Vial followed her, and she sat near a fire. The other sat, all of them cross-legged, and Vial did too. It was a way of sitting she had almost forgotten she had used to sit when she had been but a child. Then the one who had talked to her said, we welcome you, bride of the wolf, she told her. I am Mahonia, and I am the head wife of our chief. It is an honor making your acquaintance, she added, pressing the palm of her hand to her chest. Vial replicated the gesture. Thank you, she said, and likewise, it is a great honor to meet you all. I am afraid I believed you to be children tales, she admitted. Mahonia laughed. No apologies needed, she told them. People often forget what they do not see, she added. It was not her fault. She smiled, and Vial could not help but smile back. We hold the Starks in great honor, Mahonia told her. They are kin to us, she told her, and now you are Stark too, so welcome. Vial blinked, surprised. Kin, she asked. You mean to tell me that the story about the father of Brandon the builder and his child of the forest wife is true? She asked, surprised. You believed us to be myth, one of the others said. Why should not something else you also believe a myth be truth? They all seemed wise beyond their years and appearances. She nodded. You are right, of course, she nodded, feeling herself blush. Mahonia smiled and took her hand again. You will be the bride of Wolf and the mother of wolves, she told her. Are you ready for this? She asked, and Vial mulled very well on her next words. I do not know if anyone is ever ready to be a parent, she admitted, but all that matters is having heart and volition, so I think that I hope I have both, she added. Mahonia nodded. That was wise, she acknowledged. Wise perhaps beyond your years, young wolf bride, she told her. She leaned in and touched the blade Vial had attached to her hip. She had been told she was never to part from it since the moment Brandon had attached it to her waist the previous day. She traced the symbol with her long clawed fingers, and Vial waited before she added, you are one soul, one heart and one body. Now, she told her, gesturing with a nod to Brandon, who mock screamed and dramatically fell to the ground as the children ran to him, afraid they really had damaged him, which made her smile, and that has a meaning here in the north. Vial returned her attention to Mahonia and looked at her intently. When Snowdrop disappeared we were very afraid, she told them. She was once called the Bloody Wolf Bride too, and when also Brandon the Bloody Sword disappeared at the same time we feared the worst. She recounted the Red Lake was named so because of his ruthlessness against the children, and Snowdrop was one of the most beautiful and beloved of ours. Vial remained silent as the chief's consort spoke. She was so graceful and kind and gentle we feared she would have been abducted and would be mistreated. Mahonia continued. So we resumed the hostilities. She shook her nut brown head. So many died, she said, and her voice was so full of sorrow that Vial almost felt herself ready to cry. So much blood was spent that when Snowdrop returned her snow-white hands were as bloody as that of the man she had fallen in love with. Those around them murmured, but her child, she added, her child was pure. She said no matter what blood had accompanied his birth, she told her, he was untouched by it all. And he was destined to greatness. She turned and watched Brandon as he surprised the children with a surprise attack as they jumped on him. Every Brandon of the line is destined to greatness, she added, whether by tragedy or by victory they are all bound to go down in history. Her dark grey-green eyes fixed on her. To be by the side of such a man means being able to stave off the shadows that will threaten to overflow his light. Mahonia told her, are you ready to do that? She wondered, and Vial straightened her shoulders. I may not be a dangerous dragon, my lady, she told her, but a dragon I am nonetheless. She added, my breath may not hold fire, but fire cannot kill a dragon, and I will walk on flames barefooted if it means staving off any shadows in his path. She added, looking at Brandon, if I am to be the bride of Wolf I will run with him, and I will pray to the moon to light his journey through the darkness. Mahonia was about to say something, but another voice interrupted them all. Cute words. Vial turned and she saw a children of the forest alone, sat in the snow. They won't cut a throat open when it will be needed, she added. They won't stop bloodshed when it will happen. The woman looked sour and unhappy as she added, and we will pay the price of it, as we always do. Vial blinked. Why do you sound so certain? You cannot know history will repeat itself, she said, and even thought you cannot compare something you have not lived with something yet to come, she asked. The woman huffed. I talk this way because I remember. And I remember, Dragon Girl, because I was there, she spat, and Vial looked down before raising her chin and exhaling. Then I am sorry, my lady, she told her, and the woman blinked, clearly surprised. Because you lost them all too, she added. She caught Mahonia smiling from the corner of her eye. She then smiled softly. But I am not Snowdrop, nor I pride myself to be, she added. I am myself, and perhaps that won't stop bloodshed from occurring, but you can bet I will do all I must, all I can to protect those in need, and those I love. The woman studied her for a bit, and Mahonia talked to her in their dialect, calling her Leaf, in a tone of both reproach and order. But the woman stood, walking slowly to her. Even standing, Vial was almost as tall as her remaining sat. The woman continued to study her and then asked something of Mahonia in the same language. The woman looked between them both, then nodded. So Leaf unsheathed an obsidian dagger from her waist, and Vial flinched a bit. The woman came closer, and Vial steeled herself, convinced Brandon would not stay and watch if she was about to be gutted by a mythological creature. She had trust in her husband and would trust in his kin, even in the belligerent one. The woman wrapped a clawed hand around her wrist and faced her palm up, then the just pricked her left ring finger. With the dagger stained with her blood, she walked to the fire and dropped just but one drop of her blood in the flames. Then she took a handful of snow and dropped it on the flames, which extinguished as she observed the smoke provoked. Then she turned to her. I will tell you something, Dragon Girl, she told her. This I tell you, you will be like the snow. She advanced to her. You either will be clean, and pure and enchanting, or storming, dangerous and lethal. It will all depend on you. Vial looked down and she felt Brandon's gaze on her. She turned and gazed back at him. A moment after he stood up, and still with the children playing and jumping around him, he came closer to her and knelt by her side. He then brought her hand to his mouth and, before all those people, which made her blush worse than a maiden during her first night, he licked her ring finger clean of the blood. "You are my dragon now," he murmured to her, pressing a kiss to her lips, uncaring for their audience, and no matter what, wolves do not turn their back to their own. Vial looked at him from beneath her long lashes and pressed a kiss to his lips too, almost unable to resist. "We will be in this together then, may it be passing through fire or ice," she promised, pressing her forehead against his as he caressed her silver hair. "May it be passing through fire or ice," he swore right back at her. It was Mahonia who spoke. "Then you will be," she added, "and you may have to fight both." And it sounded strangely prophetic. Notes. So here we are. I do hope you liked it, and let me know what you think of it. Laughing smiley. What do you think of Leaf predictions and of Mahonia's? Will they have to pass through fire and ice? How will Vial presence change Brandon's fate? I loved adding both Vial and Brandon with children, because I feel like Vial would be kind and gentle to them, and the Brandon who could be able to appeal to his wolf blood against whatever enemy could also be a great softie around children. What do you think? I also wanted Vial to have a talk with Shara, because I feel like she comes from the right place, wanting to make sure Vial is fine and just doesn't know how to show it, and I feel like Vial would want to try and mend bridges instead of burning them in a moment. I feel she is just that kind of person. As always, sending all my love. G. Chapter 6, Lionel I. Summary. Lionel assists to something that should make her happy, but she feels offended. She is still a 14 years old after all, and her brother gives her a warning she means not to forget. But who is her brother talking about? Can she trust this violet-eyed people who have invaded her home? Notes. Hello, how are you? Hope you are all fine. This chapter is a bit short, but it sets the pace in Lionel's mind. We see her as a teenager, because no matter what she still is a teenager, so she does some things an adult would not do and does not understand other things a mature woman would. Hope you all like it, and please do not be shy, do tell me what you think of it. Winking smiley. I promise not to bite you if you wanna say you don't like it. Winking smiley. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Lionel I. She was walking down the corridors of Winterfell when her brother cornered her. "Come Lionel," he urged her. "Lady Vial is convincing father to let you practice bow and arrow," he added, dragging her, his small hand wrapped around her bony wrist. Lionel felt her grey azure eyes widen when she heard him tell her that her good sister seemed to be about to convince her father of something she has pleaded for him for ages. If she could, Lionel would hold steel, but her father had been abundantly clear, she was a lady and lady did not need to carry steel, no matter what other ladies of other keeps of the north did. If indeed her father relinquished and accepted to have her practice bow and arrow, he had denied her that too, only because Princess Avilia of House Targaryen had deigned to ask it of him. She may very well puke. Her father had never been moved by her pleas for her to carry a sword or to learn how to use bow and arrow. If he was moved by his good daughter, a foreign woman coming from the south, instead of his own child's word, Lionel would feel as if she was slapped. So, despite the possibility of learning the skill she had so longly longed for, she didn't share in Benjen's excitement as he dragged her along the corridors and to the great hall, half empty because of the late hour of the morning, where her lord father and her lady mother were still breaking their fast and speaking with her brother and his wife. Princess Avilia was carded in a light grey gown that made her jealous. Why could she wear her house color? She knew she had married Brandon, but that didn't entitle her to wear grey and white when her house colors were red and black. A dark furred cloak held together with a bronze snarling direwolf pin she remembered seeing on Brandon so many times she had lost count of how many. Her long silver blonde hair were shiny and dangled across her back in waves she would envy. Was she a bit more vain? A single braid started on the left side of her head and cut horizontally, her head ending behind the right ear, secured by a dark pin. She had flowers in her hair, winter flowers and winter berries intertwined at her crown braid, and her face was as pale as the moon, of the same shape too, but alight with mirth and happiness. She was shining, and Brandon, the fool, was looking at her as if he was half in love with her already. A foreign woman with no understanding of the north, with no right to stay beside the next lord of Winterfell, seemed to have him already wrapped around her little finger. A northerner girl should have claimed that place, a Mormont, a Marndale, a Bolton, a Dustin, a Umber or a Carstark, not a Targaryen, standing by her brother's side. Her dark-skinned brother, the knight on whom the king had bestowed the name of Blackfyr after the male line had died, was there too and seemed to nod at whatever the woman was saying. Her mother was smiling indulgently at her good daughter, and Benjen kept shaking her arm as if to make her see how great this Avilia Targaryen was for trying and talk their father to something he should have let her do from the very beginning. "Thought I am sure I will not ever match the skill of a real archer," the dragon woman was saying. "It was a skill I learned nonetheless. My brother was kind enough to teach me, and he would be most happy to do the same for your daughter. A daughter of a proud house like House Stark should know her way around a weapon, bow and arrow, should be perfect for her to still maintain her ladylike composure." She added, "Even better, I am sure archery would better her poise and bearing exponentially." Lyanna felt as if she had been just slapped in the face. "I have poise and bearing, you dragon bitch," she wanted to scream and claw at her, as the woman turned to her with a beaming smile on her full lips, as if she had not just insulted her gravely before her own kin, making herself appear better than Lyanna. Brandon too, at her side, twice her size, looked at her too with a big smile on his face, as if him too had not understood the underlaid offense Lyanna had just been served. Her lady mother rested her hand on her lord father's. "If King Aes has deemed appropriate for a princess of the crown to learn archery, surely we can do the same for our Lyanna," she said. "You know how much she strives to learn to fight. Archery would be a good compromise between her wanting to carry steel and you not wanting her to do so," she offered. Her lord father looked to be about to think over the problem when the dragon woman took another step, Brandon gravitating around her as if linked to her by some kind of invisible lace, and made a small courtesy. "Your daughter would learn much from archery. Patience, strength and precision. All skills much needed in the lady of a great house, my lord." Her lord father seemed lost in thought, so Brandon thought wise to give his input too. "My wife is right, father," he told him. "Lyanna would be very happy to learn archery, and she'll continue with all her other lessons too, as to make House Stark proud. Even more Cecil Hino promises to be a great teacher, since he had the patience to teach my wife, who can be rather clumsy. You try walking around the Wolf's Wood in a gown, you big oaf," the dragon woman said, swatting his shoulder and making him chuckle as she giggled, her features alight with mirth. "I should set Charlotte on you for that comment," she added, and Brandon leaned in on her to kiss her on the lips. But Lyanna's fell. She had gone to the Wolf's Wood. That meant she had been admitted inside the children's camp and probably had even talked to them. She had been privy to something not even Lyanna was. She had been given the chance to see one of the best kept secrets of the North, something so ingrained into it that Lyanna did not believe the North would survive without the children, and to Lyanna it had not been permitted the same courtesy. "Besides," the dragon woman said, "Winterberry appreciated me despite me being clumsy." Brandon gave her a kiss on the cheek. "Of course she did," he told her. "You are lovely, how could she not?" She saw that both her lady mother and Benjen looked at the couple as if they were seeing something awe-inspiring, while her lord father looked mighty satisfied with what he was seeing, as his match turned out to be better than he had hoped for, while Lyanna could only see a sneaking, dragon woman who had wrapped her mighty brother to her little finger as if she had done him some sort of spell. "Very well," her lord father conceded. "She shall commence the lessons of archery," he told them, before turning to her and pointing an accusing finger to her. "But, if you as much as slack off in any other lesson due to any proper lady, Lyanna," he said, "the lessons of archery will be immediately stopped. Have I been clear?" She nodded, reminded by his speech of when Eddard had left for the Vale. "Do not fight, boy, but if you do, win." Then her lord father nodded and dismissed them all with a gesture of his hand. Her lady mother remained by his side talking quietly to him, and Lyanna followed her brothers and good sister outside of the great hall of Winterfell, Cecil Hino with them. The dark-skinned Targaryen nodded to them and made show of a bow. "I will arrange for the lessons with your tutor, Lady Lyanna," he offered. "I am sure you'll do greatly," he added, gently, oh so gently, as his eyes sparkled a dark violet. Lyanna would not say she was easily moved by a pretty face, but to be a dark-skinned base-born man, Cecil Hino was indeed handsome, and he spoke kindly to everyone around him and thought it was clear he had a soft spot for his sister he did not show to any other. It was also clear the same way he was gentle and caring. He was indeed dashing, what with his coal-black skin and dark amethyst eyes, and Lyanna did feel her cheeks warm a bit when he bowed to her too before excusing himself and leaving them. Her good sister closed in on her almost immediately. "I hope you enjoy the lessons, my lady," she offered with a small kind smile of her lips. Lyanna bit her lip, tasting salt upon her tongue, trying to rein in her need to lash at her for the words spoken against her as the daughter of House Stark. If you think I will thank you, I am sorry to disappoint, but I will not, she told her sternly and surely, her voice even as she looked in her bright amethyst's eyes, trying to convey that no matter what kind of sorcery she had worked on the rest of her family, Lionel would not fall prey to it. She looked taken aback by her reply, and she felt Benjamin's eyes upon her as Brandon came closer to her, almost as if shielding her. Do not be disrespectful, Lionel, he advised her. My wife went out of her way to get you what you wanted, he added. You ought to be grateful for that alone, especially after the way you have treated her, as if she is some kind of hateful crack in your perfect life. She watched as Princess Avalia's hand caressed his back in a soothing manner, grasping then his hand, so much more bigger than hers, in her own, looking at him sideways. Brandon, she tried, let it go, it's fine. No, it's not. Brandon rebutted, looking right back at her again, his steel eyes holding so much strength and force that she almost reeled back. Never had her brother looked at her in such a way. She is not asking for you to thank her, but I am telling you to deserve it, what she did for you, from this day until the end of these days. He then grasped her hand in his, nestled it in the crook of his elbow, and gently steered her away from her and Benjamin. His wife did look back at her with an almost pitying gaze sent her way, and Lionel felt even more angered by her display of so-called pureness that made everyone defend her when she had been the one insulted and attacked by her. Why are you so intent on hating her? Benjamin asked. She is good, he added when she turned to look at him. She did what she did, inside of there, for you. To give you something you wanted, and she managed to get it for you, and you react this way. He looked strangely older than his 10 and 1 years old. She's a snake, she told him, she will poison us all. She just insulted me before our own parents, and you all just stood by and let her. Ned would never do such a thing, she snapped. Benjamin looked at her for a long while. What is really bothering you is that she is adjusting far more easily than you'd like, and that she's good, though I don't understand why you should be mad about it. Wouldn't you rather Brandon with someone good than with some random woman who has not her qualities? What qualities, Benjamin? You have barely known her what, a month? She asked. Why do you think her father sent her north? Because she had such great qualities. No, he sent her north because he wanted to embarrass us, and he did it, only you all seem not to get it. Benjamin looked at her at length. You should be careful, Lionel, he said. Not everything is as it seems, he told her, his voice strange, metallic, and Lionel understood she was standing before a greensward and not her little brother, and a beautiful face could hide a terrible and cruel character. You should hear yourself. You should follow your own advice, she muttered, uneasy with the way he was looking at her. It was kind, but also strangely prophetic. You need to steer clear of those who'd seem perfect for you, sister, he told her, for a pair of amethyst eyes could bring you and our family misfortune, he added. Not all songs are true, and not all knights and prince and princesses are as the songs depicts them. Lionel felt strangely a shiver running up her spine, looking at her brother's white eyes, rolled backwards so that he could see what the gods meant for him to see, as he kept talking to her. No matter what promises are made, Lionel, he told her, it will all end in blood. It always comes down to blood. Then her brother was back, his dark eyes fixed on her and his lips in a straight line. The greatest love sometimes is not enclosed in songs. Lionel blinked. I do not know what you are talking about, she said. I do not even like songs, she added, looking over to him as if he had some kind of stroke or a fever, because he had never been either this cryptic neither this worried looking. You will, he told her, you will know, and when you do you should remember it. The greatest of love is not always enclosed in songs. He excused himself without as much as telling her anything else, and Lionel followed him for a moment, then she brought a hand to her own lips. The greatest of love is not always enclosed in songs. There was clamor outside, and Lionel walked to the windows to see what it was about. It looked like her brother had decided to let out his frustration with her against a worthy opponent, by the looks of it, as he swung his great axe over his head as Cecilino pars it with his own great sword, their steps matching, and as his wife looks on from the sidelines. Not matter what promises are made, Lionel. It will all end in blood. Brandon swung his great axe around, and Cecilino ducked, using then the flat of his great sword to try and causing him to trip over his own feet as they fought. Brandon did not lose his balance too much, but was distracted long enough for the Black Fear to wield his weapon to his neck. The match ended as a tie, to Lionel's surprise, because as Cecilino had indeed been successful in not losing the match, Brandon had his sword pointed at his throat. He also was pointing his great axe at the groin of the dark-skinned Black Fear. Princess Avalia clapped, as did those who had assisted at the match. It always comes down to blood, Benja's warning rang in her ear as she watched Princess Avalia offering a cloth to her half-brother as the three of them talked. Her amethyst's eyes, a beautiful face could hide a terrible and cruel character, so violet and sparkling with affection and love fixed on her bastard brother. A pair of amethyst eyes could bring you and our family misfortune. It always comes down to blood, Lionel, was Benjamin trying to warn her that Princess Avalia would betray them all and that behind her beautiful face a scaly, monstrous dragon character was hidden. She would betray them all if Lionel did not keep an eye on her. Notes. So here we are, hope you liked. That everything is fine with you and I await to hear what you think about it. Who is Benja's prophecy referring to? Will Selhino betray them? Will Avalia? Or is Benjamin referring to someone else entirely? Stay tuned to find out. Laughing smiley. As always, sending all my love. G. Chapter 7, Elia I. Summary. Elia in KL. Notes. So, hello, how are you? Hope you are all fine. I am going to warn you already, this chapter may trigger you because it speaks of miscarriages, so if you think at any point that you may not want to go on reading it, I have left a small resume under it in which it says what happened without having to read through it. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Trigger warning. In this chapter we face the tragedy of miscarriages and how a woman can feel after it and how a man in the medieval times could have reacted. So if you at any point feel as if you cannot read it, I've left a resume at the end, after the last line, and you can read only that. It'll be enough for the plot. Sorry in advance if anyone feels triggered by this. Elia I. The sun was shining over the Red Keep and yet Elia, Princess of Dawn and Princess Consort of the Seven Kingdoms, felt only heavy of heart. A warm hand grasped her shoulder kindly and Elia finally tore her gaze away from the setting sun on the Bay of Black Waters, her eyes teary and her face ashen. She met the worried gaze of the violet eyes of her best friend and lady-in-waiting, Ashura. Her kind, worried glance made Elia remember everything she had felt numb up until that moment, but seeing the pity and the worry in her best friend's gaze made everything surge back, stronger and more powerful, and a sob tore at her throat as hot tears fell down her cheeks. She slid down to the ground and Ashura followed her down too, kneeling by her side as sob after sob Elia heaved out every tear, every hope and every disillusion. It had been the fourth time. The fourth time in 3 years. No matter what Elia did, how many maesters she saw, how many diets she changed, how many hours secluded in prayer on her knees she passed, it seemed the gods didn't see fit to bless her with another child. Or rather, they saw fit for her to fall pregnant and then lose that bright hope her condition inevitably brought with itself. It was twice as damning and terrible. Why was the mother so cruel? She wanted to scream to the sky. Why did the stranger take every child she conceived in her womb away before Elia could meet them? Why did the father saw fit for her to go through this terrible pain? Why didn't the crone offer sage counsel to help her weary soul? Ashura remained steadily by her side and hugged her closer to her slightly taller frame, her midnight black hair falling in soft waves down her shoulders, her violet eyes filled with tears too. Please, princess, she pleaded, her tone of voice desperate. Please, do not cry. But Elia was done not crying. She didn't cry when her husband held her hand during the first child she lost, almost 5 moons into the pregnancy, nor when her good father commented on his only and first grandchild that she smelled dawnish after Elia had suffered the 2 last moons of the pregnancy bedridden and later 25 hours in the birth chamber pushing out of her womb her daughter. She had held back her tears when her husband suggested they remained in King's Landing even when all Elia wanted to do was escape to Dragonstone, where her child was born, to be away from the unsupportive and disdain-filled glare of her good father and her good brothers. Roriger had already visited her, and though he had been supportive, he had also been quick in his visit, brought away by John Knighton, or by one of his brothers for one thing or the other. The first time she had had a miscarriage, before the birth of Rhaenys, Roriger had not left her side for weeks before she finally had gotten him to leave. It looked like the continuous miscarriages were starting to wear down on him too, and Elia was afraid he'd finally start to listen to all those voices telling him how she was unfit to be his bride, to be the mother of his children. Not even capable of giving him a heir. She missed her good sister in these moments. Avalia was kind and sweet of disposition, but fierce when steered the wrong way. Elia and Avalia had grown close during the princess' stay in Dragonstone with her oldest brother due to her health problems. She had been a clever child when first Elia had put foot on Dragonstone, and now she was a woman grown and wedded to a northern savage, all because her father believed her to be too sweet of disposition to actually marry one of her brothers, no matter that young'un is 5 and 10, just a shy 2 years younger than Avilia, actually was quite taken with his sister in true Targaryen fashion. Thankfully she wasn't alone in this nest of vipers. Ashura was her beacon of support through bad and good, and Elia couldn't really be more grateful for her friend than in those moments in which everything went dark. Ashura always knew exactly what was needed to bring back a bit of light. He was a boy, she cried out, the memory of the babe, already half formed in the sheets of her bed, the screams of the maesters as they tried to stay the early birth. My boy, she sobbed, my prince of Dragonstone. Elia had been sure since the beginning of this pregnancy that this was the boy. Her boy. And he was. But she had lost him even before she could properly mourn him. They had taken his small corpse away, not fit to live and not fit to be seen by the distraught mother either. She had been so heartbroken and furious because of it, that the sorrow of the loss had not set in her bones until later, when in the night she had found herself wide awake, unable to sleep and unable to do nothing but think about her babe, her baby boy, she had lost so early on. I know, princess, I know, Ashura said, rocking her while embracing her, and caressing her long chestnut brown hair, left to themselves frizzy and all tangled. But you have been prescribed bed rest, princess. We should listen to what the maester said and be thankful that. That what? She snapped, distraught. That I am still able to conceive but apparently not able to bring a pregnancy to fruition, the sobs tearing again at her throat. The prince has said, she tried, but Elia glared at her through tear-filled eyes. My husband is too occupied with his prophecies to look around himself and think about his wife, alone and abandoned after she lost his son. She loves Rhaegar, and she knows that, after his own fashion, he loves her too, though not in the way a husband should love his wife, and more in friendship and kinship because they share Rhaenys. Your husband, his voice was cold, a hiss that made her shiver, is here, and he is worried about his abandoned and alone wife, he added for good measure, coming closer to them. Ashura hastened on her feet, offering him a courtesy. But there is no love in his purple eyes as he looks at her, only disdain. Go, he ordered. I will see to my wife's welfare, even if I have to bind her to the bed to get her to rest. Elia awaited, not even bothering to hide her surprise at his presence there. When finally Ashura closed the door behind herself, Rhaegar came closer. Alone and abandoned. She felt as if struck and looked down at her hands resting, palm up, on her tights. She blinked away the tears. Alone and abandoned. She flinched and her spine went rigid as Rhaegar started to pace around the chamber like a caged animal. I am trying so hard, Elia, so hard to look past all of this, to not believe what everyone keeps telling me. But you are making it difficult, Elia. How difficult can it be to born a child? She felt the sob tearing at her throat. I am trying, my love, she tried, but Rhaegar held his hand up, silencing her. It doesn't look like it, he snapped. The maester recommended rest, and what are you doing? I am grieving. Elia screamed, finally finding her voice as her husband turned to her, his eyes slits of purple on a pale ivory face, his silver hair in disarray. I've lost a child I have nurtured in my womb for 5 moons. Rhaegar, what do you suppose I am doing? Another sob tore at her throat, and suddenly Rhaegar was there. Her husband knelt on the marble floor, his arms embracing her and his face hidden in the crook of his neck, his breath heaving. You don't want to wake the dragon, do you? That was the Targaryen saying. Their tempers could flare more easily than their seed to quicken in a woman's womb, and they could be flaming in their pursuit for fury when angered. And yet it looked like this time her husband's temper had flared easily, but had also easily been squashed. Elia stood rigid on her knees, feeling her husband's hot tears against the skin of her shoulder left bare by her nightgown. She was not as much held as he was holding on to her, and Elia felt a surge of love for him. Perhaps he did not love her, not in the way she so much wanted. But he did love her, after his own fashion, and to Elia it would be enough. She had already lost so much she couldn't bear to lose him too. And yet, Rhaegar said, hours after that moment, his tears now dried and his purple eyes red for the crying, I have seen him, I have seen my son, the son you will give me. He had your cheekbones and your smile, but he was a true Targaryen and wore our colors so well. Elia, why? His purple eyes took a hue that almost looked like crazy, and Elia felt suddenly chilled to her very bones. Rhaegar, do not think of prophecies right now, my prince, she tried as she felt the sobs at her throat once again. We just lost a child, you must. I must think, Rhaegar said, and you, Elia, must rest. You have just lost a child. If the gods are good, it wasn't our Egon, but another. The prophecy is clear, the dragon must have 3 heads, Elia, and you will give me those 3 heads. Elia did not feel the warmth of his hands on her arms as he helped her on her feet and steered her to the bed. She didn't feel his love as she had the first time they had lost a child. She felt just chilled, because her husband was once again gone. He was already thinking of that damn prophecy and of how he was the prince that was promised and that he would have 3 children because the dragon must have 3 heads. Elia wanted to cry, and she did as he put her in bed and kissed her brow. Indifferent or not noticing her tears, Roriger then only told her to take care and rest and that they would try again, and then he left. Elia was alone, once again, and she felt as if the world had gone cold. Not even the sun warmed her the same from where it hit her legs from the window. So Elia cried. She cried for her babe, she cried for Rhaenys, her daughter who was now with her tutors, for the husband she had had when they had first married. For her Egon, the one she would maybe one day bring in this world. She cried, and she cried, and she cried. Resume. Elia has lost a babe during the pregnancy, almost at the 5th month, and she is grieving. Roriger half grieves with her, half is convinced she will give him the 3 heads of the dragon, and is also the classic man of the medieval times who thinks that the woman has any power over the birth of the child she carries. Notes. So here we are, let me know what you think about it, winking smiley. As always, sending all my love, G. Chapter 8, Brandon 3. Summary. Brandon has a bit of bonding time with Vial as he brings her to meet someone. Notes. Hello. How are you? Hope you are all fine.